Welcome back into our coverage of Idalia. You're looking at a live picture of Surf City in North Carolina, where the winds are very gusty. We've got some lightning and thunder. There is a storm surge threat that continues, especially for the coast of North Carolina with onshore winds. There's also a tornado threat that's going to be going for a while tonight. We've seen a lot of rotation showing up offshore, and some of those cells may make it onshore as well. And also have another look for you at Cedar Key. This is what it looked like, or actually Myrtle Beach, first of all, in South Carolina. And things are improving here. We've had some very heavy rain not very far away, and most of that heavy rain is now just a little farther to the north, getting up into the interior part of the state. Quite a bit of wet weather between Florence and Myrtle Beach tonight, as much as maybe a foot of rain has fallen already. And this is what it was like when Idalia's storm surge pushed ashore in Cedar Key in Florida. And just a terrific amount of surge this morning, 7 feet. And it could have actually been a lot higher had the storm been a little farther to the right. Horseshoe Beach, farther north, actually got as much as 9 feet of surge earlier today. So just a terrific surge event, a very strong wind event as well, coming up into North Florida, and a lot of problems up and down the west coast of Florida, even into the Tampa area where we saw the top surge there in Tampa. It's pretty amazing. The storm was 100 miles. The center of the storm, the core of the storm, was 100 miles to the west of Tampa as it was moving up through the Gulf of Mexico, and we still got the top surge there in Tampa that we have seen. Now, that tells you something about how few storms we have seen that have directly affected Tampa in recent years. So there's a look at the landfall. Keaton Beach in Florida, Category 3 storm winds of 125 miles per hour, and the pressure was 949 millibars. Now, looking at the current situation, it is a 60-mile-per-hour storm moving northeast at 21 miles per hour. That forward speed has been an important component of this, because what you have is an inverse relationship between forward speed and rainfall amounts. And so as your forward speed comes down, your rainfall amounts go up. And so with a storm that's moving along pretty quickly, that helps keep a lid on the rainfall amounts. But even as it stands, we've still had a terrific amount of rain in some parts of South Carolina in particular. And this is the forecast track and intensities from the Hurricane Center, looking for the storm to move through Myrtle Beach and continue on eastward into Wilmington, just south, and then move out over the open water as we get into the day tomorrow. Now, here's a look at the radar picture, and you'll notice there are several flash flood warnings that are now in effect here, generally along 95, and then also up towards I-40 as well. So Myrtle Beach, as we mentioned, looking pretty quiet right now. We've got some showers that are coming through right now. We are seeing some gusty wind, but the heavier rain is farther inland and then up into the Wilmington area as well. And in this area in particular, there's a sort of pivot point there where we have seen just a terrific amount of wet weather. This whole area over the last 6 hours is where we've seen more than 3 inches, and then in the orange, more than 5 inches, and then as much as a foot of rain estimated by radar northwest of Myrtle Beach. Well, in Myrtle Beach, we've only had about 1 or 2 inches. So a pretty amazing difference, just getting a little farther inland relative to where Myrtle Beach is there. Then as we look farther east, we're watching a bunch of cells coming up towards Morehead City. I want you to notice the character of these cells. So we're seeing a little bit of a curlicue right there, and then right there, and then right there, and there, and there. So all of these cells are showing some level of rotation as they're coming up towards Morehead City. But what's interesting is you can follow these couplets. You see the area where they're sort of bright and dark right next to each other. Those are areas where there's spin. There's spin right there, there's spin right there, there's spin right there. Well, follow this with your eyes and watch as these areas of spin come up towards the coast, and then watch what happens as they get right up towards the coast there. You see how they kind of fizzle out? So they're really well defined while they're offshore, but then as they get right up near the coast, then they begin to fizzle out. And so what I think is happening here is you've got a lot of wind shear in the atmosphere, and that's a big part of what drives rotation in storms. You've got winds that are coming out of the southeast and then turning to the east, coming up there towards Morehead City. And at the same time, you've got winds that are coming out of the south-southwest And so there's a terrific amount of turning in the lowest 5,000 feet of the atmosphere. That's what gets those storms rotating. There's also more than enough instability to keep the storms really strong offshore, but as soon as you get onshore, that instability drops off terrifically. And in fact, it starts to drop off even before you get to the coast there. So I think the storms are strong, and rotating, and then they get right up into this position, and then they start to weaken because there's less instability, and they're not making it all the way to the coast. Again, I think that's what you're seeing when you look at this velocity data, when you see all those areas of spin and they start to come up. So we'll see if that holds. Hopefully that'll continue to be the case. Nonetheless, there is a tornado watch area that is in effect here for the eastern part of North Carolina, and that is going until 4 o'clock in the morning. And so certainly there will be an ongoing concern for tornadoes, but at least for the time being, it appears that there's going to be a much greater threat of waterspouts offshore than there will be of tornadoes on land. Well, meteorologist Alex Wallace was in the thick of the storm as it raced through South Carolina, and he sent this report from the South Carolina Low Country.
Idalia continued to have its impact across the southeast, of course, moving its way into Florida first, making that landfall into Georgia, South Georgia, catching the brunt of this thing, and then eventually here into South Carolina, where I am in Santee, South Carolina, where the heavier downpours and the rain has been an issue, along with some of those gusty winds. At times, tropical storm force wind gusts being felt. And the rain still coming down as well. Now, the rain tapering off, and that should be the case as we head through the rest of the night, which will be some good news to allow some of these roads that are covered in water to recede. Look at this intersection here behind me, where it has certainly improved here as we've worked our way through the night. At times where I'm standing, I would not be standing because the water was a little bit too high, at least to ankle deep, and in some cases even higher. We've seen cars kind of come down this road, and they kind of face that decision, the fork in the road. Do I go through the water, or do I turn around and find another route to take? And some have smartly come to this area and seen, well, I can't really see how deep that water is. It's just not worth taking the risk to go through it, so they turn around and find another route. And that is going to be the key as we head through the rest of the night. If you have to get out on the roads and you see water on the roads, it's just not safe to go through it. Turn around. Do not drown, of course, is the motto out there for you. And, just staying home. That really is the key to be the safest. Not getting out on these roadways is going to be the key, and we've been hearing that from officials all across the state of South Carolina and across the southeast for that matter. Just wait for this thing to pass, because as we work through the day on Thursday, it will be much improved.
All right, Alex, thanks so much. And let's take a look now at where we think this thing is going to be going over the next several hours. And so it will continue to work up and along the coast, and we're going to continue to see very heavy rain in eastern parts of North Carolina in particular. Let's go forward through the overnight. So really coming down there along the 95 corridor, into the Sounds, into the Outer Banks. We've got some stronger storms that are coming on shore as well. So there will be some tornado threat along with those. We may not have as much of an issue with instability in the Outer Banks in particular, with the islands being surrounded by water there. And then you go into the morning hours, still a lot of heavy rain at the beaches in North Carolina, and that is gradually going to be ending in North Carolina from west to east as we go through the middle of the day tomorrow. So ongoing rainfall threat here, looking for an additional 3 to 5 inches of rain into eastern parts of North Carolina, and there are flood watches that are still up into the eastern parts of North and South Carolina. 9 o'clock, going along that 95 corridor and going through this evening and right into tomorrow morning as well. And we've got a live view right now for you from Surf City in North Carolina. And so very gusty winds here. And again, it's going to be, a tough night tonight. It's not going to be an easy night tonight. You see there's plenty of lightning there as well, but I'm sure that most people are safely ensconced at this point. We're looking for, some water level rise, but we don't think it's going to be profound like the type that we saw earlier today in Charleston, or certainly what we saw in Florida. And there is going to be some tornado threat, and there's going to be a flood threat, certainly inland as well. And then you see there's a pretty good bit of lightning coming through that area. But Chris, it looks like, for the most part, we're going to see threats gradually declining as we move towards the morning.
Yeah, I mean, looking at that live, you clearly see the power it still has. Still tropical storm as it's now moving into the Carolinas, moving towards North Carolina, and then we'll push offshore here momentarily. But especially at the coast where you have less friction, that wind is still pretty potent, and you got that horizontal rain. Obviously, this is an intense storm with the thunder and lightning, but the rainfall rates here are a big threat given the flash flood potential we could see in eastern North Carolina overnight, like we've seen in South Carolina. So still monitoring the conditions here across the Carolinas. That's again a live look at Surf City, where it's pretty brutal late tonight. Want to take you back to Florida, though. This is in Taylor County. This is Perry. We saw the eye of Hurricane Idalia earlier this morning, and still about 99% of the county is without power tonight, and that's because of the extensive tree damage we have here across Taylor County. It's actually a very large county for Florida, but a fairly rural county. Perry, the county seat, right in the central part of the county, and then you got some of the smaller communities towards the beaches like Keaton Beach. So this is probably one of the hardest hit locations in Florida, and even the communications tower, which is what you're looking at right there, taking a huge hit. Our storm checker Charles Peak is in Gainesville tonight after spending the day surveying some of the damage in North Florida and in Perry. Take a look.
Covering Hurricane Idalia as it came ashore this morning. I was in Perry, Florida, and the eye wall came through there. About 6 o'clock in the morning, you had before it got there, the outer bands were just, having the winds start to pick up and conditions deteriorated rapidly. It was, landfall took place in Keaton Beach about 7:45 local time, and about that time we were in the western eye wall of that storm, and the winds were just ripping. You had trees coming down, trees being shredded, buildings coming apart, metal flying in front of me. I was using a building as a protection to not have the debris hit me, but you could at times almost couldn't even see very far in front of you because of this blinding sideways rain. And it was just at times just crazy, the scene that was there. But as I got out and got around, you could see in town widespread power lines down, transformers down, trees down all over the place, blocking roads. You couldn't get around. And it was just, it was a tough situation for that little community. It's about 7,000 people in Taylor County. And but they're dealing with it right now. They had good spirits as I was talking with them. They were a little surprised by some of it, but it's going to be a situation. It's going to take a little bit for them to clean it up. But I did see as I was leaving all the way from Pennsylvania Task Force 1, Urban Search and Rescue. They had their big trucks. They were coming into town, and they had already pre-positioned down here to help the state of Florida with the recovery efforts. In Gainesville, Florida, I'm Charles Peak, the Weather Channel.
All right, well, we want to show you some of the worst damage that we've seen from Idalia now, and that is in parts of Taylor County. I want to walk you through what we've been dealing with here. Look at this. This was earlier in Keaton Beach. Howling winds, upwards of gusts over 100 miles per hour, and we've seen some rough scenes, lots of downed trees, power outages, and then extensive damage to the storm surge. And that was what we were very concerned about. And a lot of these places like Keaton Beach down through Deckle Beach, as well as Horseshoe Beach and Cedar Key were significantly impacted by this. We got some drone footage from Keaton Beach, close to where Idalia made landfall. And even though this house is elevated, it didn't stop the devastation. Winds here were strong enough to tear the roof completely apart. You got the bedroom exposed. It's almost like a blueprint of the house. And totally exposed. Walls blown down, drywall and insulation ripped out. And just gives you a kind of a testament to how strong the winds were here in Keaton Beach when landfall occurred. And obviously then the storm surge on top of that got into a lot of these folks' homes. I want to walk you through Hurricane Idalia. Again, landfall at Keaton Beach, Florida, as a Category 3. Now, remember, it did strengthen to Category 4 just prior, and then was going an eye wall replacement cycle as it was moving ashore. So that actually helped us out somewhat, because the winds could have been even higher than they actually were. Strongest Big Bend landfall since 1896. And walking us through the past few days, it's been an interesting journey here for Idalia. Took a little while to actually get organized. It had been battling shear for quite some time. And then as we went into the past 48 hours, we saw Idalia get into the Gulf of Mexico, and that's when it just kind of took off. It slowly strengthened and then rapidly intensified as it was about 200 miles away from the Big Bend of Florida. And really quickly, you can see that blow up of thunderstorms. It was going through that replacement cycle and then started to intensify, but it was over land at that point. All right, but Idalia still holding strong, not a hurricane anymore, but a tropical storm, and still battering now parts of North Carolina. Take a live look at Surf City right now, seeing some very strong gusts, certainly up to tropical storm force this evening.
Looking for a bladder leak?
Watch the Weather Channel for ongoing coverage of Idalia. Get trusted updates on the storm, only on the Weather Channel. Of the Weather Channel, now available to everyone.
This is epic!
Trusted live coverage when it matters most is now yours to stream with the Weather Channel TV app, real-time radar, and maps that let you track all the action.
Let's get into the detail of
Personalization, customization, hundreds of hours of your favorite shows, and so much more. There's never been a better way for everyone to watch the Weather Channel. Available now on these platforms. Download now to start your free 7-day trial.
All right, want to take a live look at Surf City, North Carolina, where we're getting battered with some intense squalls right now. This is all thanks to now Tropical Storm Idalia, not far here from Surf City, North Carolina. That's how far it's traveled. It's moving relatively quickly, actually picking up speed as it's been pushing through the southeast. And you can see the soaking rains, the tropical downpours that we've seen are concerning for flash flooding, as well as some gusty winds. We could even see some power outages here, especially along the coast where you have a little less friction and some of those open water bodies where that water or that wind can flow through a little bit more strongly. Similar view from North Topsail Beach, North Carolina. Not as wet here, but you still see things kind of bouncing around, keeping things relatively windy across the North Carolina coast. Some big wave action too there on the left, and some lightning that we've been seeing here on the radar as well. All right, well, Idalia officially made landfall this morning in Keaton Beach, but the effects were felt many miles away, including in Cedar Key. That's where Storm Tracker Jim Cantori was as the storm moved in. I want to take a look back at what it was like.
We wanted to show you storm surge, and that's exactly what I'm doing here. Brad, let's go down, look at what we got coming in. Look at this water coming in now. It is just rushing in at the present time. We've got tropical storm conditions here. The center is about 50, probably 55 miles or so to my west-northwest now. So it's probably at its closest point here for Cedar Key. But remember, we're still pushing that water. Huge southwest component with the wind, still pushing that water in here. And you kind of wonder with these homes across the street with the lattice, how high the water is going to get there with the forecast of 12 to 16 feet. We lost power about an hour ago, but the surge is coming in. I mean, come look at this. This is unbelievable. We're essentially surrounded by water right now. It has not stopped. But you can literally see the surge coming in. Go down to the University of Florida sign, Brad. I mean, it's just coming in waves. Just coming in waves, and it keeps piling up here. We're getting strong tropical storm force, maybe a hurricane gust, but what we're seeing is this right here, the storm surge coming in. And now what's really been interesting since the last time we talked to you guys is now that the water is high enough where you're not getting that land interface with the Gulf, the waves are just free to roll in. But look at this, just rushing in here. Absolutely incredible amounts of water, but we've got some roof damage. All right, let's show the roof here. About 3 doors down. You can see it flapping around there. It's a tin roof, and there it goes. A tremendous amount of storm surge. Pretty much in the entire Big Bend has a huge water rise right now, and even here, where I'm at in Cedar Key, we now have the record, 621. All right, 6-1 was the old record back in 2016 from Hermine. Now we've set the record at 621 here at Cedar Key. Let me show you what that means. The water has come in and almost rolled to the top of that first little overhang, which is incredible. We've actually had door damage on this first door, Brad. You can see what looks like the framing that's actually come out now. So that's the door. So there's water easily in to that first room there. So there's structural damage. As far as the eye can see here, guys, this is what we've got. Water out, still coming in, still rising here. We're going to go above the record, which is currently at 6.21 at the lattice reading. That is the new record for storm surge here in Cedar Key. There's no doubt that you're getting water into at least 2 of these homes. You start to see more and more debris kind of floating around, whether they be pomprons, parts of docks, 2x4s. We've had some containers come through as well. We've peaked at our surge, 6.9 feet. Record surge here in the Cedar Key area at 6.9 feet. The old record with Hermine in 2016 on September 2nd was 6.1. We are now at 6.9. The problem is it doesn't matter about the numbers. We've got water in homes and businesses here.
Wow, kind of is a tense situation there. Thankfully, the team is safe. Everyone's safe so far from what we know of in Cedar Key, Florida, but substantial storm surge. Now, winds weren't as strong as what we saw in Perry, where we were closer into the eye wall. We only gusted to 77 miles per hour in Cedar Key, but we had storm surge all the way down the west coast of Florida. And people, I think, are really in for a reminder how vulnerable this coastline is, especially if you lived in Madeira Beach, Treasure Island, Crystal River, Tampa. We had significant rise in water, even with the center of Idalia, as far as it was away, over 150 miles offshore. And we still had significant storm surge in some parts. So it really kind of goes to show you how this wasn't even a worst case scenario for Tampa, but we still had flooding and some homes did even take on water that far south. We did have a tornado too here in Little River, some damage in the Cherry Grove area, also outside of Charleston and Goose Creek tornado. That was with the video of the car being flipped over on the interstate. So it's been pretty active.
When moderate
Idalia certainly making its presence felt across the southeast, including where I am in Santee, South Carolina, where it has been a wet and windy time for most of the evening. Things starting to calm down, which is certainly some good news, and that's going to allow for the areas that have had to deal with some power outages. The crews are going to be able to get out there and get that power back. In fact, behind me here, there's a hotel that's behind me and this gas station. They were completely dark for a good portion of the night as the sort of the height of the system moved on through, but the power has returned. So we are definitely seeing that improving, and that will be the case as we head on through the rest of the night. Other thing that will be improving is some of the water covering the roadways. This intersection has been filled with water all evening long. That is starting to recede. Where I'm standing, I would be in that water. In fact, the water here has really come back and receded here in this parking lot of this gas station. Where I'm walking, I would be in ankle-deep water, but that has receded quite a bit, and that has also allowed for better access now along this road, which was actually shut down behind me. It doesn't necessarily shut down, but the police were protecting people from coming through these waters, which were just a little too high for them. But we've seen those waters come down, and this is sort of the theme: an improvement with the waters receding and an improvement with the power outages as well. That's going to be something that we deal with through the night. But be safe. If you don't have to be out there on those roads, you just don't want to be doing that. Thursday, much improvement is on the way.
All right, Alex, thanks so much. And let's take a look at the latest on the storm. We have the advisory from the National Hurricane Center as of 11 p.m. It is a 60-mile-per-hour storm moving northeast at 21 miles per hour. So that fast motion is important. We've still gotten a foot of rain in parts of South Carolina out of this thing, even with it moving along. And when they move much more slowly, we get a lot more rain. And so, for as bad as it's been, it could be much worse if the storm was not moving. And it's going to continue to accelerate, move out here into the Atlantic, south of North Carolina, and then probably just kind of meander in the Atlantic beyond that. There's a look at the current winds, and we still see some strong winds in eastern parts of North and South Carolina. Right now gusting to 28 miles per hour in Charleston. There's an offshore flow right now in Charleston, mercifully, because we had a significant water level rise tonight, 3.5 feet above normally dry ground, and that was actually the 5th highest that we have seen in Charleston. And then we've got an onshore flow here up into North Carolina, so there's an ongoing concern for storm surge there. Winds now gusting to 31 in Beaufort, and winds gusting to 31 also in Clinton in North Carolina. It's going to be a very gusty, stormy night up into these areas. So there's the storm surge potential. Going forward, it's not going to be as high as it was farther southwest, but still some worry for some high water in coastal areas going through the rest of the night tonight. And also concern about high water inland, as we've had just such heavy rain. There are several flash flood warnings that continue at this hour, mostly north and west of Myrtle Beach, and then west of Wilmington. There you see some of the rainfall totals here. That large area in yellow is where we've had more than 3 inches of rain. In red, we've had more than 5. And then you look at that one spot there, that's a foot of rain that the radar has estimated falling northwest of Myrtle Beach. Not that much, actually, in Myrtle Beach, which is interesting, but quite a bit more as you get farther inland. Also, another thing to watch tonight is there are several cells here that have, if you look real closely, you can see this kind of an appearance, looks something like that. A bunch of these cells have that appearance. They're all rotating cells because there's a lot of wind shear in the atmosphere. And when we look at the velocity data, we see these spins showing up. So there's one right in there. You see the area of bright and also dark, and another one right in there, and then another one right in here. And watch this. If you just kind of keep your eyes on what's happening here, you see these spins, they're moving up towards the coast. They're pretty well developed as they're moving towards the coast. But then as they get near the coast, they're kind of fizzling out. So what's going on here? Well, what's happening is there's a lot of wind shear in the atmosphere. So you've got winds coming out of the southeast and then eventually out of the east at the surface. And at the same time, you've got winds that are coming out of the south at 5,000 feet, about a mile up. That's a lot of turning of the winds. And so when you have that, you have more chance to have a rotating storm. But when we look at the instability, there's the legend right there. There's a ton of instability or fuel for thunderstorms offshore, but then there's hardly any onshore. It is increasing a little bit right through here, so that's interesting. But I think the fact that it drops off as you get closer to the coast is part of why those spins are not maintaining themselves as they get closer to the coast. Nonetheless, there is a threat for tornadoes tonight, and there is a tornado watch, and that's going until 4 o'clock in the morning. And certainly we could have more instability up here into the Outer Banks. So going to be a lot to watch as we go through the night, and we'll have more on this storm coming up in just a few minutes.
Watch the Weather Channel for ongoing coverage of Idalia. Get trusted updates on the storm only on the Weather Channel.
I'm actually seeing huge waves now crashing on shore.
Look at this. Look at this. Just rushing in here.
All right, guys, look out. The eye wall is now whipping through South Georgia.
6.9 feet. Record surge.
And welcome back to our coverage of Idalia. We are following a storm that continues to pose threats in terms of very heavy rain and storm surge and also tornadoes. And we wanted to take a little look back and show you what happened earlier today. It made landfall this morning at 7:45 Eastern as a Category 3 storm at Keaton Beach in Florida. And we saw some record levels of storm surge flooding. Cedar Key with 7 feet of storm surge flooding. So that is the #1 highest level of storm surge flooding there. Also in Tampa, this is pretty amazing, 4.18 feet of storm surge flooding in Old Port Tampa. That too is the record, and that's a testament to a couple of different things. One is just that the baseline is changing. The other is that we haven't had a storm that has been really, really bad for Tampa in a very, very long time. I mean, the center of this thing passed to the west of Tampa by a good 100 miles. And so that eye wall, that, very windiest part of the storm was well to the west of Tampa when it was coming up. If the track had been farther east and the center had come in more like that, we'd be talking about a whole different ball game in Tampa, which is home to millions and millions of people. As it stands, it was devastating for the Big Bend area of Florida. And again, the storm coming in this morning, and then that eye wall moving up through northern Florida. Major tree damage, power line damage coming up into South Georgia as well. This is how it looked around noon today, and we still had a pretty well-defined center there. And then you see as we go through the afternoon, the wind field becoming a little more elongated, a little more stretched. But we had an onshore flow driving into Charleston this evening, and that brought us a record level of flooding there, the 5th highest storm surge in Charleston this evening as that came through. And right now we've got an offshore flow there in Charleston, so things have improved dramatically. That's the current winds. The onshore flow still continuing into parts of the Outer Banks and also into North Carolina, and that's where there's an ongoing storm surge threat. And still some gusty wind associated with the storm. Winds gusting to 32 miles per hour in Hartsville right now and 33 in Oak Island. And again, we may see some additional storm surge concerns, I think particularly into North Carolina, as that's where the onshore flow is. The flow is offshore into South Carolina and also into Georgia. Chris, over to you.
All right, well, throughout the day, we've been getting glimpses of Idalia's widespread impacts. And here's video out of Keaton Beach, Florida. This was near landfall, all right? So you get an idea not only how strong the winds were, but look at the storm surge, violent here as we were dealing with a Category 3 hurricane. Sustained winds at the time of landfall were 125 miles per hour. Idalia tied the record for the strongest hurricane to strike Florida's Big Bend since record keepings began. 180 miles south of landfall. And this is what we're seeing here in Clearwater, Florida. Look at this storm surge flooding, even flooding a lot of streets through downtown Clearwater along the beaches, also down through Madeira Beach and Reddington Beach, as well as Treasure Island, parts of St. Pete Beach, even in throughout Hillsborough County where Tampa is. We had numerous neighborhoods that were dealing with inlets and bayside flooding because of that water rise. Even though the center of Idalia was well off to our west and north. You can see furniture kind of floating there in the street. All right, let's get a look at the latest power outages. We've seen some substantial improvements since earlier this afternoon, but we still have significant outages in northern Florida, and some of these are going to be days before they are restored. The number will improve for the people who have some trees and power lines down, but in the more hard-hit locations like southern Georgia and Lowndes County, where Valdosta is, as well as here in Taylor County, also Madison County, also very hard hit with those extreme winds we were dealing with earlier. So 134,000 customers without power now in Georgia. South Carolina, we're about 35,000 customers without power and starting to see some power outages in far eastern North Carolina. Here's all the storm reports. We've had some tornadoes today confirmed in South Carolina. Storm surge was primarily along the Gulf Coast and especially bad in the Big Bend. And then the wind was really confined to the Panhandle and across southeast Georgia and parts of South Carolina. Goose Creek, that's where we had that tornado. It actually flipped a vehicle over on the road. Charleston, not that long ago, was dealing with a significant storm surge here, a top 5 water rise there for Charleston Harbor. And then even here into Georgia, a lot of flash flooding where we've seen anywhere from 6 to almost 10 inches of rain.
Power of the Weather Channel, now available to everyone.
This is epic.
Trusted live coverage when it matters most is now yours to stream with the Weather Channel TV app, real-time radar, and maps that let you track all the action. Available now on these platforms. Download now to start your free 7-day trial.
Welcome back to our continuing live coverage of Idalia. This is what it looked like this morning in Cedar Key, Florida, just after the storm made landfall. Terrific storm surge here. 7 feet of storm surge would have actually been even worse had the storm tracked a little farther to the east. And while most of the people who live on Cedar Key evacuated, a few stayed behind to ride the storm out. Our storm tracker Jim Cantori talked to one of them.
This is your condo.
This is my condo, and this is, of course, all a wall. You know, just a regular outdoor wall, and there used to be a door here and a window there.
Right.
And this was
Was that the garage back there?
Well, yes, and the thing is, that was the garage and with a garage door.
Right.
But everyone here, and this is or can be a bedroom. All right, there's a window unit there, and the full bath here with a shower and everything. But mostly, everyone here uses it for storage. Right. We don't even put our golf carts in. So, yeah, it's a laundry room. Always use it as a laundry room and storage. And so as it just, obviously, I mean, breaked out walls.
It's a breakout wall.
Yeah, it's a breakout wall, and they work. That's.
So, but did you guys? You moved your cars to higher ground, right?
I moved.
I was going to say, just kind of take us through this a little bit. You knew it was coming in.
I knew it was coming in, so I took my car and my golf cart to higher ground. I lived here for 24 years, so I've been through a lot of these. I've only lived in this particular place for like 4 years. But the other place I lived in was a house directly on the Gulf, also up on stilts. So I'm used to it.
You're no stranger to this.
Yeah, no stranger. No, I've been through it.
It's just, you know. What did you first think though when you kind of walked outside? You could probably hear it, right?
Yeah.
You were here.
Before I walked outside, what happened is the power went off at 5:25.
Right.
So woke me up.
For us,
and so I couldn't see much of anything. So I really, until about 7 or 7:30. my bedroom was on the back, so I walked over here, and it was pretty amazing. I mean, it was.
Well, yeah, you're right. You're right on the goal. This is where it was coming from, and you could see it coming up with waves on top.
Yeah,
of it, right?
waves. I mean, it was big waves. The weather was much stronger than I thought.
Frank, how high is that deck, if you don't mind me asking?
That's from where we're standing to here is 10 feet.
All right, so we had a forecast storm surge of 12 to 16 feet.
Right.
Did you know that?
I knew that, yeah, sure. But that's above sea level. So I've got a couple of foot variance. And I know it's 10 feet because I measured it last night. To say, okay,
so
what's
10 and so 12. You're looking at the
Yeah. So
still, though.
Yeah, still.
That
it's
16
possible.
number make you a little
It's possible.
nervous?
Yeah, it was possible to get up there where I live. I mean, I don't
Right, you could
live
go up to the
down.
higher floor.
I could do that. I've got two more
Okay.
floors up there. So I wasn't afraid of that. I mean, I told somebody, I said, I'm not afraid that I'm going to get hurt or my life or anything.
Right.
It's just going to all get torn up. So my question is, do I want to be here and see it getting torn up, or do I want to go somewhere else? Now, of course, you typically, or I do, say, well, maybe I see here, maybe I can help something. But if I'd gone somewhere else, I'd be clean and shaven and air conditioned and all that stuff. And like we aren't.
Stay here and help.
I'd rather stay here thinking
and your neighbors and things like that.
And then that's right. I mean, see what's going on. So I did. I've always stayed here, and but I'm not one of these. I'm staying. No. I just haven't.
You just feel it out and you do your own.
I feel it out and do my own thing. I pay attention to what y'all say, but then I think about it some, and I think, okay, like this one. It's going of the whole time. I felt this thing is going up close to Apalachicola, so the storm itself. It's no big deal for us.
Yeah, so the last day we weren't in the cone. We knew the track wasn't going to be here.
But the surge.
Exactly. You're always going to have the storm surge here.
Yeah, and I knew that. So I knew that was coming. And of course, it was worse the further north it goes, the further. And so I knew that, and that's why I came out and measured and thought, well,
all right. Hey, you know what, Frank? Fair enough. I mean, honestly, I just wanted to get your train of thought. I want to share that with our viewers, how you went through the process. But admit it, though, when you're looking out off this deck, even in the morning, and you're seeing that coming in.
When the daylight came up, because it was so cloudy, around 7 or 7:30, and I'm standing right there, we can almost touch it, and we know now the water was up to here. And it was, 42 knots. I don't know how that is now.
We had one gust of 77.
Okay.
I think that's our highest
But it was at least at the time I looked 42 knots, which is 45 close to 50 miles an hour.
Yeah, we had a lot of gusts in the tropical storm.
And it was pretty scary.
An amazing story there, and we're not out of the woods yet. We still have a little ways to go.
Yeah.
And we have a live picture of Surf City in North Carolina to show you, and still got an onshore flow here, so there's a surge threat. There's going to be a tornado threat tonight. Tornado watch going until 4 o'clock in the morning. Still some wind and very heavy rain. We've seen as much as a foot of rain already, Chris, in some parts of South Carolina.
Yeah, the highest rainfall totals have actually been in South Carolina and possibly in North Carolina when you look at the path, all things considered. But boy, have conditions gone downhill here in North Topsail Beach, North Carolina. Horizontal wind-driven rain and tropical storm conditions. More continuing live coverage continues here on the Weather Channel.
Tropical storm Idalia causing widespread damage from Florida to the Carolinas, and it's not quite over yet. Thanks for joining us. I'm meteorologist Ray Stajic.
And I'm meteorologist Mark Thibodeau. We are still tracing the threat for flooding and tornadoes this morning along the East Coast as Idalia begins to move out.
And Hurricane Idalia lashing the Big Bend area of Florida. This was Wednesday morning, close to or at landfall, threatening high storm surge, rough and choppy waves, crashing along the Gulf Coast shores, pushing the water inland. Now the deadly storm continues to threaten the Carolinas with flooding rains and storm surge, and for some, a record water rise, including parts of Tampa Bay. Even though you're well away from the center, 100 plus miles from where the center made landfall. And right now we're looking at a heavy rain threat and a flood threat. Could be some severe weather, but the latest, as of the 11 o'clock advisory, tropical storm Idalia, now 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm. Pressure 987, moving northeast pretty quickly at 21 miles per hour. The center located 15 miles northwest of Charleston, South Carolina. You can kind of see now, there's the center, and all the action's now displaced off to the east and north from where the center of lowest pressure is. That doesn't mean we're still not going to have impacts, as tropical storm warnings will stay in place from Kill Devil Hills down toward Charleston and just north of Savannah. These will probably start getting cut away at here as we head through the coming hours as the storm continues to move on off toward the north and the northeast. Wind shear, you could see some. We got strong shear on the backside here, and this is actually moving into an area of shear. And as it moves on in about this direction, we'll continue to see a weakening, which is a good thing. But right now, seeing heavy rainfall basically from about Raleigh and east and down toward the south toward Wilmington. Stronger storms coming onshore now, and some of those storms, not only thunder, lightning, but we'll have to keep our eyes out for potentially some tornadoes developing, and there'll be quick movers, quick spin ups, and then they'll be done. Fayetteville, gusty winds 36 miles per hour. Wilmington 22 with some of your gusts. And the wind's starting to back off now, back on the backside now, coming around to the northwest. A wind, at least from the actual system itself, not a huge problem, but in some of these embedded thunderstorms, we could get some stronger winds. Around Myrtle Beach, you're just getting some general showers, but as you go just inland, Georgetown and into Horry and Marion counties, this is a flash flood warning. Conway, Marion, and into the Mullins area. If you are in these areas, radar indicated flash flooding going on. Certainly going to be something that we'll have to deal with, especially in the northern side of that warning, where we're starting to see some of that heavier rainfall kind of move over the same areas time after time. North Carolina, Brunswick, and Columbus counties. Tabor City and Whiteville, some areas seeing some flash flooding here. Really North and South Carolina, it's been realizing some of the heaviest rain totals we've gotten from this system, and more rain continuing to rotate in as we head through the morning hours now. Further north around Elizabeth City, not much wind, but some showers. Hatteras, not much wind, but again, as these kind of bands of thunderstorms come on in, at times gusty winds and maybe some severe weather, still staying under tropical storm force. Jacksonville, New Bern with some of the gusts, and out near Raleigh, kind of a calm wind, and you're kind of right on the edge here of where you've got rain and where you don't. You get out near the Triad, and especially the further west you go, there's basically nothing. Tornado watch in and around this watch until 4 a.m. We'll have that threat for tornadoes in and around this watch area. Morehead City, Wilmington, and again, they'll come in from the east and move northwest pretty quickly. So if you do get warned, you're going to have to move pretty quickly and get into your safe place. Right now, no active tornado warnings, but we'll watch these cells, the ones offshore especially, showing maybe some quick spin ups here, and it does look like we'll continue to have that threat for isolated tornadic development and likely severe storms as we head through the early morning with torcons of about 4. Wilmington to Myrtle Beach and Morehead City. It's about a 40% chance of getting a tornado. So do have that chance of severe storms. Let's see what the model does with this. By 3, 4, 5 in the morning, starting to see the heaviest rain into the Outer Banks and pulling away, Mark, as we head on through the midday hours on Thursday.
Well, luckily, things are beginning to wind down a little bit. Still some active weather. This is Hurricane Idalia making landfall near Keaton Beach, Florida yesterday. This place got pounded by the storm surge. You can see the water level rising, and then you put the big pounding waves on top of that as the water just forcefully pushes ashore. And yeah, really seeing quite a bit of surge here happening all at once. This is the most dangerous part of the hurricane by far as the storm surge moves inland. We are looking at here again several reports of where the storm surge moved in. Horseshoe Beach here, storm surge moving into this area right here, and you can see that we're kind of on the right front side of that. St. George Island as well, the Bayside storm surge flooding. St. George Island on Austin from social media here, water impacting structures. This is all moved in, and this happens very, very quickly standardly when these systems begin to move inland here. You see the storm surge happening very quickly. We still are looking at a storm surge warning for parts of the South Carolina coast here, from Beaufort, South Carolina up to Charleston, where we could be looking at still at least some minor storm surge potential as we head through the nighttime hours. Remember, Idalia is now all the way over here. It was moving towards Cedar Key, and the nature coast of Florida early this morning, and this is a quick mover. So now it's all the way over here. The wind's coming in from the east-southeast, and that is pushing that water up towards Hatteras and potentially down into parts of northeastern South Carolina. It's not a really big water level rise we're seeing right now, but still about a half-foot water level rise here across parts of southeastern North Carolina, and we are looking at that to continue as we go through tonight. Again, a weakening system, but it's the flow that's important, coming around from the east-southeast into southeastern North Carolina, causing some storm surge damage here. Still looking at a 2 to 4 foot surge potential here at Charleston, but more so up here now where the center is offshore, pushing the water. We actually have the wind starting to come a little bit offshore now across parts of South Carolina and down into Georgia, and more of an onshore flow here, and that's why we're seeing the water level rises come up a little bit in North Carolina and beginning to decrease a little bit to the south, but still quite a bit to keep an eye on tonight. We're looking at some very heavy rainfall potential. Could be 5 to 8 inches of rain, 8 to 12 inches of rain to the south. Again, these bands rotating in, these inflow bands with the leftover system rotating into the area. Still a tropical storm, and looking at that potential for very heavy rainfall, especially on the Outer Banks. Still looking at some flash flood warnings here. Well, the storm surge isn't only damaging homes and buildings, but vehicles too, and the salt water pushing in from the Gulf could cause major problems to cars. Dr. Rick Knabb explains.
If your area has been flooded, you'll need to pay special attention to your vehicle.
Well, first thing is if you can get an idea of how flooded it was. Was it just up to the wheels or was it halfway up the vehicle? And either way, you probably want to be careful before you just start it. So to get an idea of where the water damage is, you can usually see a dirt line along your vehicle. If it's really flooded high, I wouldn't even start it. I would just call a mechanic, have it towed there.
Even if you take these first steps, there could still be some hidden problems lurking inside.
You can use a wet vac and get it out of the carpeted area, but know that below the carpet, it's not padding like it is in your home. It's jute. It's compression of plastic and all kinds of other things. So what it does is the water stays there. And when you think you've air dried it out, you've left behind mold, mildew, potentially E. coli. Because you got to remember, you don't know what's in the water. It could even be sewage water. It could be really dangerous for your health.
And there are lots of things that can go wrong with the mechanics.
What you don't see is regular saltwater, rainwater. If it sits in deep water, this is a brake line that's brand new. And this is one that's been sitting in salt water. And the damage means that your brakes don't work. Think about fuel lines. Get from the gas tank from the back to the front where your engine is. That's going to be a problem because it could potentially cause a fire. These are the kind of things that are plainly obvious, but what isn't is airbags not deploying if the water was up high enough, or anti-lock brake systems not working. All those safety features that are in play can stop at any time or not even function.
Ultimately, if you have concerns after your vehicle is flooded, it's best not to drive it. Have it checked by a certified ASE technician or your local qualified mechanic.
Holy, that car's flying! What the?
Yeah, this eye-catching video yesterday giving viewers the description of just how strong the winds were gusting. This happened on a highway in Goose Creek in South Carolina, which is right outside of Charleston, when Idalia was pushing through. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper informing people to heed the warnings and have a plan in place.
We expect winds, rain, and flooding to continue to impact our state even into Saturday. I encourage people to listen to local officials and make sure you have a plan if you're in an area with a flood risk. Prepare an emergency kit if you don't have one. This is the first storm of the season, and it may not be the last.
Certainly, things are settling down pretty quickly as we go through the day on Thursday, but still impacts now as we continue to watch Idalia make its approach to the North Carolina coast. But here's what we'd had. And basically a tropical storm on the 27th at 11:15, and look at how quickly by the 30th at 5 a.m. went to a Category 4 storm, and then weakened briefly right before landfall, or just before landfall, to 125. So really the difference academic between 130 and 125. Landfall, a high Category 3. Certainly leaving in its mark. Plenty of power outages. In Florida, almost 150,000 customers still out. Georgia, 133 and change. South Carolina, 34,000. So still going to be some time before we get all the power back on, especially in Florida. Some of the hardest hit areas here up around the Big Bend and north central Florida. Power outage tracker showing us here, Madison, Perry counties. These are areas or in these cities where we are seeing some of the greatest power outages. Even around Valdosta, we did get some heavier winds there and some trees down and some power out in one of the harder hit areas in South Georgia. And as we go further north, we're just around 10,000 out, Waycross out near Brunswick. So all these areas do have still some power out in spots. Even up near Savannah and Hilton Head, we're still seeing some of the power out in some spots as we get into South Carolina near Myrtle Beach and just inland and along Interstate 95. Some of these areas still do have some folks without power up to 10,000 in some of these regions. So surviving the storm with a power outage, operate generators outdoors. This is big, all right, and do not use candles or any other open flame. Stay away from down power lines and have a plan to power life-sustaining medical equipment. Can't forget about that. If you do have something that's got to help you with your health, certainly going to have to way to keep that going. All right, here's some of the wind reports. South Tybee Island, we did almost gust to hurricane force, 69 miles per hour. Savannah had a 66 mile per hour gust, and Fort Sumter, South Carolina, about 51 miles. So it didn't really see anything in the way of hurricane force wind gusts, but it's certainly up there on the strong tropical storm force winds. And now the winds still gusting 30 plus. Florence and Charleston, those are some of the stronger winds, but further north around Wilmington and Hatteras, not getting real strong winds, at least not showing up here. And as we go through the day, you can see 30, 35 miles per hour. Some of the higher gusts could get to tropical storm force, but right now still seeing 35 up near Hatteras as we go through early on Thursday, and then maybe to 50 here Wilmington around late morning. Same thing here as the center gets closest to you and you get on kind of that west and northwest side of the center of the storm. As it pulls away through the evening hours, still fairly gusty winds. Potentially there, look at that, to 75 miles per hour here out near Hatteras. So at times, Mark, there may be some stronger winds as we go on through the day, but as you go further inland away from the center, certainly those winds will be lighter.
Yeah, exactly, Ray, especially right there at the Outer Banks. Still some pretty good gusts. Well, it'll be a long and lengthy cleanup for the Cedar Creek area. Here's a look at some of the damage residents will be faced with when they return home. And you can see here we have structural damage, awnings down at gas stations. We have boards knocked off of houses, structures, parts of structures caved in, cars pushed off the road, all kinds of debris that you would expect to find with a landfalling Category 3 hurricane. Of course, trees into automobiles there. You can see just structures with damage at the surface at the multiple levels as well. So we are going to continue to watch this system move off the eastern coast of North Carolina. It had its genesis down here across the Northwest Caribbean. This is where it developed, meandered off the Yucatan coast for a little while, and then it began to move north and start to develop. It took a little while to get its act together, but it did. It strengthened to a tropical storm and not a whole lot of movement. And then finally, when the wind shear at the upper levels of the atmosphere backed off a little bit, we really saw this take off, and pretty quickly too, up to a Category 1 hurricane. And then, of course, moving up to the north and getting into this area that's known as a loop current, where it really took off and became the upper end of a 3, lower end of a 4 even here, moving up into the Nature Coast here, causing quite a surge in this area earlier this morning. And now it's just moving very quickly, you know, up across, it moved up across North Florida near the Keaton Beach area. And then now we're seeing it off the Outer Banks of North Carolina. So fast moving system for sure. And we'll continue to monitor this as it heads up to the north into eastern North Carolina. So here it is. We had landfall Keaton Beach, 125 miles an hour, Category 3, upper end of a Category 3 as well. 5 more miles an hour, it would have been a 4. Strongest Big Bend landfall since 1896. The 8th Gulf of Mexico major landfall since 2017, which, by the way, was a very bad year for landfalls in the Gulf of Mexico and the tropical Atlantic alike. So wind gusts here, they were pretty strong, 85 miles an hour with this system. And Abusil Junction and Horseshoe Beach, 81 miles an hour. So the gusts were in the Category 1 territory, but again, there probably was some areas that had stronger gusts than that. Still getting the assessment in on that one. And we'll continue to see these wind gusts, these damage reports come in here for inland over South Georgia into the Carolinas. And keep in mind, some of the strong wind gusts that cause damage, that could actually be from tornadoes that were embedded within the hurricane. So big system, moved quick. Now it's over eastern North Carolina. The Weather Channel will stay on top of the threats 24/7 with the Weather Channel streaming app. Here you can find updated alerts for the tropics and the temps. Go to streamtwc.com to get it for Roku, Amazon Fire, and Google TV. You can have all the information here that you need to keep yourself and your family safe. And remember to download the free Odyssey app. You can listen to the Weather Channel's live coverage here and keep yourself safe that way as well. Know where the storm is going and where it's going to be going down the road as well. Taking you live here to North Topsail Beach, Florida. And you can see here we still have got some gusty winds happening and some heavy rainfall across the area as this system moves out into the Atlantic.
Watch the Weather Channel for ongoing coverage of Idalia. Get trusted updates on the storm only on the Weather Channel. You can't stop a force of nature. This hurricane season, rely on one of your own. It's a fact. No other news network out there is trusted more than the Weather Channel.
This is epic.
Trusted to give you every advantage before the storm. Trusted to be there where and when you need us. Trusted to bring you every angle of the storm using landfall cams on our streaming TV app.
Absolutely unbelievable.
Because America doesn't trust hurricane season to just anyone.
All right, water from the Gulf of Mexico invading Florida neighborhoods, all thanks to Idalia. Storm slammed the northern west side of Florida as a Category 3 hurricane yesterday morning. And yeah, pretty impressive now. Pictures coming in yesterday afternoon. And even through yesterday evening, you see the water rise here and wind damage inland, causing power outages, and certainly looking at what looks to be a cleanup beginning and probably continuing for quite some time here as we watch now Tropical Storm Idalia move into the eastern parts of North and South Carolina. Well, thanks for joining us for our continuing coverage. Hurricanes can kill and injure with powerful winds, flooding, and destructive storm surge. But about 44%, nearly half of all hurricane-related deaths are classified as indirect, meaning many of these tragedies happen after the storm has passed. Meteorologist Felicia Combs shares some advice that could save your life.
The storm has passed.
The weird thing is this is the back of the house. So the house has turned 300 or 180 degrees.
The damage is done.
Preparing for hurricanes is not just ensuring that you are safe during the storm. It is preparing to survive in the potentially nasty and lengthy aftermath.
This has got to be extremely stressful.
It is.
With the stress of the storm itself and the physical strain of a long recovery, about a third of indirect hurricane deaths are actually caused by heart attacks.
There's a lot of stress.
Preparation before the storm can reduce some of this stress.
Coordinate with your pharmacist or your doctor if you're going to need prescriptions filled. But to avoid the stress level is to definitely to prepare for it.
After the storm, take cleanup slow, easy, and ask for help, especially if you have a pre-existing condition.
In the aftermath of a storm, accidents are very common. Vehicle accidents on slick roads or roads that are covered in debris, or accidents in the recovery and cleanup, people falling and hitting their heads.
Because we don't have any water and no electricity.
Post-storm power outages can be deadly in many ways. Downed, but still live power lines can electrocute. Assume all power lines are live and keep your distance.
Another very dangerous ramification of extended massive power outages after hurricane is people running generators in an unsafe manner and entire families being wiped out by carbon monoxide poisoning.
Keep generators, camp stoves, and grills outside and at least 20 feet away from doors and windows.
So how do we lessen the dangers in the aftermath of a hurricane? Number one is, before the storm, to have critical supplies on hand with a first aid kit and tools and supplies and water, all the things that you need to sustain yourself.
Just because the hurricane is over, don't assume you're safe. Because many post-hurricane dangers continue for days, even weeks after the storm.
And that is definitely a very good example of how powerful and destructive these hurricanes can be. Well, Idalia making landfall early Wednesday morning on the Nature Coast, now all the way over into parts of the eastern Carolinas and moving away from the United States. But still, we are looking at a tropical storm with rain bands moving into North Carolina. By the time we get to Thursday morning, still looking at a 60-mile tropical storm. By the time we get to Thursday evening, and keep in mind here, the waters are pretty warm over here. We kind of have the run of the Gulf Stream through here. That's why it's sustaining a little bit of strength. Still a 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm as we head into Thursday evening. If you take a look at this, you can see it's been a quick mover. Again, started near the Nature Coast early Wednesday morning, and now just under 24 hours later, moving up across eastern South Carolina. Rain bands continue to move in to parts of eastern North Carolina, seeing that onshore flow into Wilmington and down towards Myrtle Beach. So that is why we still could see some water level rises here. And we still are seeing these rain bands move up. And these are very heavy tropical downpours that are moving across Wilmington and into Hatteras here. Could be looking at some flooding problems as we head through the overnight hours. Still a 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm. You can see that we've got some what we call convective bands here, the lightning strikes that you see here, and that enhances our rainfall rates. So as we head through the nighttime hours, you get under one of these bands right here, you could be looking at rainfall rates easily that go 2, maybe 3 inches an hour. That's how heavy these tropical downpours can be. And some flash flood warnings continue as a result here across parts of southeastern North Carolina, Wilmington, and down towards Myrtle Beach with these very heavy downpours. Particular heavy downpour here moving towards Hatteras right now. So we're going to keep a very close eye on that. We zoom in a little bit here. You can see the very heavy rainfall, mainly over coastal North Carolina now. And we continue to watch this as we head through the nighttime hours. Well, we've seen a lot of inland flooding from Hurricane Idalia. This is in southeastern Georgia, where flooding rains piled up on the streets of Statesboro.
And meteorologist Stephanie Abrams caught up with 2 Statesboro residents about their biggest concerns with Idalia.
All this debris that on the other side that stopped up over there, that the logs and the limbs and whatever was leave from over there, come across the road and in the yard. Everything's over there. Mostly come over here in the yard. If you notice, it stopped in the streets too. Yeah. And it's dangerous for the traffic to come down through it, because if they hit it, they might just leave the road, and hit one of the posts or hit each other.
And a tropical storm, Idalia, causing widespread damage from Florida to the Carolinas. It's not over just yet. Thanks for joining us. I'm meteorologist Mark Thibodeau.
And I'm meteorologist Ray Stajic. We are still tracking the threat for flooding and tornadoes this morning along the East Coast as Idalia begins to move out. Let's take a look from upstairs. This is a bird's eye view of some of the action yesterday in Keaton Beach, Florida, where Idalia made landfall as a powerful Category 3 hurricane. You can see some of this damage and, basically ripping walls off of homes and, a lot of water coming in too and causing a lot of damage. And looks like now as we continue to see a weakening storm, the cleanup will begin. But yeah, you just hate to see this. It's inevitable, especially during hurricane season, that we do get these stronger storms most times. It's just unfortunate that we do end up with, property damage, and that will be the case as we continue to watch the rain now. It's becoming more of a rain event and a flood event, and maybe secondary a severe weather event now is the heaviest rainfall about the eastern half of the state of North Carolina. Look at that 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm now moving northeast at 21. That's good news that it's been accelerating. Center 15 miles northwest of Charleston in South Carolina. But heavy rain and tropical storm warnings will stay in place here. New Bern, Morehead City down toward Wilmington and Charleston. Probably start seeing some of these get chipped away play at here as we head on through the morning and in through the daytime hours on Thursday. See wind shear basically coming into play here, some moderate to strong wind shear kind of weakening this system as we head through the morning. And it doesn't mean that we're not still having impacts. Plenty of flash flood warnings out there. We do see some stronger storms now. Get ready to come in toward Hatteras with thunder and lightning. Not warned on, but strong nonetheless. And as we head toward southeastern parts of North Carolina, we do have flash flood warnings. That means flooding imminent or is occurring in some of these areas. Starting to see these winds, probably gusts 30+ miles per hour. Calmer winds back on the backside where we're starting to see drier air work in. Really, the winds have stayed below tropical storm force for the most part. Flash flood warnings, though, Georgetown, Horry, and Marion counties, including the city of Conway, and then into North Carolina, Brunswick and Columbus counties, Tabor City, Whiteville, and Williams until 2 a.m. Very heavy rainfall here continuing to come in, but it looks like some drier air down to your southeast may lessen that flood threat as we head on through the next probably 30 minutes or so. Gusty winds, but again, staying below tropical storm force further north. New Bern, 28, Greenville, 17, and some heavy rain coming in, even some rain, Mark, in and around Raleigh.
Yeah, still getting some gusty winds, Ray, certainly, even though the system has been weakening and now down to sort of a medium-grade tropical storm. Here's a live look at North Topsail Beach, North Carolina, which is a little bit north of Wilmington. You can see we still are getting some gusty winds, some heavy rainfall coming in as these inflow bands from the storm continue to rotate in from south to north across the area. So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at as we head through the nighttime hours. Still looking at the potential for water level rise here. Storm surge warnings are out across the southeastern coast of North Carolina, down through Charleston, all the way down through a good chunk of the central coast of South Carolina as well, for the potential of 1 to 2 foot water level rises here. And again, what we're talking about here is you take the water level, move it up 1 or 2 feet, and you put the waves on top of that. So that is definitely what's going to cause problems here. And we have a lot of these little inlets that are located here across North Carolina. You can kind of see there's several of them, and that's problematic. If you've ever driven across the low country here of South Carolina, the road is pretty much even with the water level most of the way. So that is what we're looking at here across southeastern North Carolina into South Carolina. It does not take a whole lot to flood this area, so be very, very careful here overnight in the coastal areas from Charleston down to Beaufort. We could easily be looking at even a 1 to 2 foot water level rise, causing some potential flooding here across South Carolina into North Carolina as we head through the overnight hours. With, again, our system still around. It's a lot weaker, but it still is pushing that water up. You can see water level rises are still kind of minor, but still can't rule out the potential here for some water level rise as we head through the overnight hours. So what are we talking about here? At the most, 1 to 3 feet Hatteras. And again, it is really looking at Morehead City with a 2 to 4 foot. This kind of sticks out like a chin a little bit here. And that is certainly what we are going to be looking at through the overnight hours, that water level rise.
Watch the Weather Channel for ongoing coverage of Idalia. Get trusted updates on the storm, only on the Weather Channel.
And welcome back. We're looking at storm surge washing up on the roads in Gulfport, Florida area. This was earlier on Wednesday morning as Idalia was coming ashore. And Idalia is now a tropical storm as it passes over the Carolinas, battering the southeast with heavy rains, damaging winds. We've been tracking the storm's path, including the moments it made landfall in Florida's Big Bend. Meteorologist Jim Cantori was in the area as conditions really changed drastically in minutes as a powerful storm slammed into Florida.
We wanted to show you storm surge, and that's exactly what I'm doing here. Brad, let's go down, look at what we got coming in. Look at this water coming in now. It is just rushing in at the present time. We've got tropical storm conditions here. The center is about probably 55 miles or so to my west-northwest now. So it's probably at its closest point here for Cedar Key. But remember, we're still pushing that water. Huge southwest component with the wind, still pushing that water in here. And you kind of wonder with these homes across the street with the lattice, how high the water is going to get there with a forecast of 12 to 16 feet. We lost power about an hour ago, but the surge is coming in. I mean, come look at this. This is unbelievable. We're essentially surrounded by water right now. It has not stopped. But you can literally see the surge coming in. Go down to the University of Florida sign, Brad. I mean, it's just coming in waves. Just coming in waves, and it keeps piling up here. We're getting strong tropical storm force, maybe hurricane gust. But what we're seeing is this right here, the storm surge coming in. And now what's really been interesting since the last time we talked to you guys is now that the water is high enough where you're not getting that land interface with the Gulf, the waves are just free to roll in. But look at this. Look at this. Just rushing in here. Absolutely incredible amounts of water. But we've got some roof damage. All right, let's show the roof here. About 2 doors down, 3 doors down. You can see it flapping around there. It's a tin roof, and there it goes. A tremendous amount of storm surge. Pretty much in the entire Big Bend has a huge water rise right now. And even here, where I'm at in Cedar Key, we now have the record 621. All right, 6-1 was the old record back in 2016 from Hermine. Now we've set the record at 621 here at Cedar Key. Let me show you what that means. The water has come in and almost rolled to the top of that first little overhang, which is incredible. We've actually had door damage on this first door, Brad. You can see what looks like the framing that's actually come out now. So that's the door. So there's water easily in to that first room there. So there's structural damage. As far as the eye can see here, guys, this is what we've got. Water out, still coming in, still rising here. We're going to go above the record, which is currently at 6.21 at the latest reading. That is the new record for storm surge here in Cedar Key. There's no doubt that you're getting water in at least 2 of these homes. You start to see more and more debris kind of floating around, whether they be pomprons, parts of docks, 2x4s. We've had some containers come through as well. And we've peaked at our surge, 6.9 feet. Record surge here in the Cedar Key area at 6.9 feet. The old record with Hermine in 2016 on September 2nd was 6.1. We are now at 6.9. The problem is it doesn't matter about the numbers. We've got water in homes and businesses here.
All right, let's recap now what we did in Idalia's history, starting on the 27th. And it took a little bit of time here to get going, but Tropical Storm 10 developed and meandered kind of off the Yucatan coast. And as I had said, we're getting some thunderstorms, and then eventually we saw a lot more development as it strengthened to a tropical storm, little movement near the Yucatan Channel. But eventually, as it headed north and into the Gulf of Mexico, kind of got out of a little bit of shear and into the warm water. We did see strengthening into a hurricane as it moved north as we went on through the 28th and through the early morning hours. Becoming Category 1 storm, and then continued to push on off toward the north. And it continued to move north as we had known, and making it up and heading northbound until it became and rapidly intensified into a Category 4 before making landfall sometime early yesterday morning. So that was the evolution. The storm did develop and have rapid intensification, and that rapid intensification led to some of that video and some of those impacts that we did see there that Jim was telling us about. So landfall 7:45, a 125 Cat 3 at Keaton Beach on the Big Bend area. So it did weaken briefly from a Cat 4 right down to Cat 3 just before landfall. And now we're looking at looks to be that landfall as a Cat 3 to be the strongest Big Bend landfall since 1896. 8th Gulf of Mexico major landfall since 2017. So a little bit more history there. And now we're looking at what looks to be some of these heavier rainfall reports. 5.5 inches about at Arcadia. You get down near St. Mark's, 4.38 inches of rainfall, and Madison County, the EOC, 4.12. So didn't really see these 6+ inch, and certainly didn't get any double-digit rainfall totals. But record storm surge here at Cedar Key, 6.89 feet, beating Hermine back in 2016. Well, the Weather Channel will stay on top of Idalia 24/7, the TWC streaming app. Here you can find updated alerts for the tropics and temps. Go to streamtwc.com to get for your Roku, Amazon, Fire, and Google TV. Let's jump now into Surf City. Seeing some of the surf coming in from Idalia, now a tropical storm, a kind of rainy and breezy early morning here with some of the winds gusting to 30, and that rain will continue to be with us through most of the morning, along with a little bit of beach erosion and some dangerous rip currents.
And welcome back. More dramatic images out of Florida as Idalia pummeled into the Sunshine State as a Category 3 storm. This was a surge in Horseshoe Beach yesterday morning, Wednesday morning, as this came ashore. And you can see how very quickly the water level rises and pushes those big waves inland. You can see how unsafe this can get in a very big hurry when you have this kind of a hurricane making landfall, or any kind of a hurricane making landfall. So now we look at what is basically left with this. You can see the debris in the water as well, with this potential storm moving across the Carolinas now. Again, it's a weaker storm, but again, this is what it looked like earlier this morning when it was making landfall, when it was a hurricane. Now it's weaker. So where does it go from here? Basically, we're seeing this over central South Carolina. The leftovers of it, it's not leftovers yet per se. It's still a tropical storm Idalia. And it looks like it's going to hold kind of steady state here as it moves off to the east. There's really a couple reasons for that. Number one, the wind shear is still relatively low, so that's kind of holding the strength in place. Number two, the water temps here are very warm. This is the Gulf Stream right here, and the water temps there are quite warm all the way from the Carolinas down across the off the coast of Georgia. So that helps sustain these systems at least a little bit. It's not going to get stronger again. It's not going to go back up. At least that's the way it looks right now. But it is going to maintain itself as it moves off to the east and takes a track offshore. So here's kind of what we're looking at with this. Still looking at quite a bit of heavy rain moving up across parts of southeastern North Carolina up to Hatteras. You can see some heavier rain bands here. And the leftover center here, just about over Charleston, South Carolina. All the weather on the northeastern side of it, and this rain pushing in. The wind is pushing in like this as well. So we're looking at that water potentially pushing towards the shore of North Carolina as we head into Hatteras. This is an area that floods pretty easily because it does stick out a little bit here, and these barrier islands are very low, so it's not hard to get some flooding happening here. And you can see here also that we have some convective rains going on. That is where we have thunder and lightning going on, and as we know, Ray, that always does enhance the rainfall rates with these tropical systems.
Yeah, wind and rain and stronger winds, thunder, lightning. Maybe, we haven't seen any tornado warnings yet, but maybe some brief spin-ups also. Thanks, Mark. Well, you know, we're always worried about a storm taking out your power. Please, we want you to be careful. Meteorologist Mike Bettis has some things to remember to stay safe.
Strong storms can bring power outages, so here are a few things you can do to stay safe when the power goes out. Without power, you can break out the generator, your grill, or some other similar item, but make sure to use it outside in a well-ventilated area to avoid carbon monoxide poisoning. Carbon monoxide is an odorless and colorless gas that can be deadly. The water supply can also be compromised during a power outage, so check with local authorities on the safety of your water and boil it if recommended. According to the CDC, if the power is out for less than 4 hours, the food in your fridge is probably safe, but keep those doors closed as much as possible. But when it comes to food, when in doubt, throw it out. If the power's been out for more than a day, it's best to toss out any refrigerated medicines. If they're life-saving, use them, but get a replacement as soon as possible. If it's hot and you don't have air conditioning, look for a shelter that does. Something like a mall or a store, or maybe take a cold shower. Fans alone don't really prevent heat-related illness. As with any storm, make sure you have an emergency plan and a disaster supply kit that covers you, your family, and your pets for at least 3 days. Better to be safe than sorry.
That's great advice, especially in these cases where we have these powerful storms, and the wind history from being named to landfall the 27th through the 30th is pretty impressive. As we started this tropical storm, they got rapid intensification. And at that point, when we named the hurricane, we went from 75 miles per hour on the 29th to 130 mile per hour Cat 4 24 hours later. So rapid intensification and then a little bit of a weakening to a Cat 3, but still a strong Cat 3 as it headed toward landfall. And, you know, everything you would expect with a powerful landfalling hurricane. Power outages continue here. Florida tops the list at 146,000 and change. Georgia, we've got 131,000 customers. South Carolina, almost 37,000. And probably going to take a little bit of time to get people back online here. 10 to 20,000 in these areas around Madison and Perry. Right in about the area where we saw landfall and strongest winds, even into South Georgia, still seeing up to 10,000 customers without power. Same thing further north as you head up near Savannah. You're kind of getting up here in this 10 to 20,000 customers. Bessemer range, and further north a little bit less, but still people without power nonetheless. And notice it's all right around the center where you would expect this to be happening, and it does look like we will see a little bit more in the way of power outage potential here before the storm winds down. So remember, when you're surviving the storm, operate generators outside. Don't use candles or any other open flames. Stay away from down power lines, and have a plan to power life-sustaining medical equipment too. So it does look like, if you are going to be in one of these storms, have a way to keep yourself safe, have your supplies, and you're certainly going to want to have a way to operate generators properly.
Holy, that car's flying! What the?
And that was some of the worst from Tropical Storm Idalia, causing widespread damage from Florida now to the Carolinas, and it's not quite over yet. Thanks for joining us. I'm meteorologist Ray Stajic.
And I'm meteorologist Mark Thibodeau. We are still tracking the threat for flooding and tornadoes early on this Thursday morning along the east coast of North Carolina and South Carolina as Idalia begins to move out.
And Hurricane Idalia lashing the Big Bend of Florida Wednesday morning. Life-threatening storm surge, rough and choppy waves crashing the Gulf Coast shores and pushing the water inland. Now Idalia continues to threaten the Carolinas with flooding rains and storm surge. So we're looking right now at some of the places that were impacted. You can see Tampa. You had a record water rise in Old Tampa Bay, Myrtle Beach. Seeing the last of the rain starting to pull on out, even Cedar Key on Wednesday, you could see some of that water rise. Certainly looking at impacts to property, and going to be a little bit of time here till we get it all cleaned up. So Idalia continuing to slowly move away. At least the rainfall sticking around. It has picked up in forward speed from 24 hours ago, and it does look like we will continue to see impacts, especially now into northeastern South Carolina and eastern North Carolina, but is now more a rain and wind event. Haven't had much in the way of severe weather yet this morning, but these stronger storms you can see just offshore may have a chance of becoming severe, certainly producing gusty winds. But right now, the latest with Idalia, 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm, 991 millibars as pressure continues to go up. Moving northeast, still at 21 miles per hour as now the 2 a.m. advisory has come in. The center is located 20 miles southwest of Myrtle Beach in South Carolina. Just get ready to merge back over the Atlantic. And tropical storm warnings now stay in place, and as expected, they have dropped some of them further southwest. But relatively speaking, a pretty small area having impacts, but impacts nonetheless with near tropical storm force winds and heavy rainfall, and even that threat on the east side, especially of severe weather. A little bit of shear now starting to weaken this thing just a little bit. You can see this area in purple kind of hidden under the cloud canopy here, certainly playing a factor into why we're seeing continued weakening, plus the fact that it's been over land. Does look like now the center may be emerging back out over open water. And as we look at the rain getting thrown in here off the Atlantic, some of this heavy causing flash flooding. No severe warnings yet, but a little worried here near Hatteras and just south of that of some of these stronger storms. They could be producing some gusty winds, so pay attention to that. Gusty winds on the south and southwest side, gusting to tropical storm force at Charleston. But notice here, it's kind of the border of North and South Carolina. A lot of the rainfall is now pulled out of South Carolina, and it's eastern North Carolina kind of taking it on the chin. Leftover flood warnings, Horry and Marion counties in South Carolina. Again, light rain now, but for Britain's Neck and Marion, these are some of the places impacted. Further northeast into Brunswick and Columbus County in North Carolina, some of this heavier rainfall potentially producing a bit of flash flooding. So seek higher ground, and just a pretty large area basically east of Raleigh of rain. A lot of it coming down heavily toward the coast, and some of these embedded thunderstorms could be producing some stronger winds. Wind gusts there to tropical storm force at New Bern. So not only are we seeing the heavy rain come in, but some stronger winds at times. And as we would expect, severe weather could also mean tornadoes. And there is a tornado watch here until 4 a.m. Morehead City and Wilmington and all the way up to Hatteras, so the Outer Banks in this. And this is the area where we could get those quick spin ups. Tropical system usually verifying as weak EF0s and EF1s. And we'll watch kind of these little cells here that may try to spin up pretty briefly and move in and potentially produce short-lived tornadoes, but right now we don't have any active warnings. The guidance showing that we are going to continue to see the center get out over the Atlantic, produce heavy rainfall here out in through the Outer Banks through mid-morning and then pulling away as we head through midday. So marked by lunchtime, most of us have seen the last of the rain.
That's right. Moving out into the Atlantic, good riddance, certainly. After the storm, it didn't take crews no time to come in and restore power. In some areas like St. Augustine, winds and toppled over trees were a contributing factor for the bulk of the power outages. We've seen quite a bit of tree damage with this particular hurricane as it moves inland, like we always do. Of course, the storm surge right at the coast. And speaking of the surge, we really, in addition to the wind damage, the trees coming down here across the first coast and the nature coast of Florida and then inland over South Georgia and parts of North Florida. You can see here that the surge really was pretty significant across Cedar Key. Horseshoe Beach here, storm surge reported in this area as well. St. George Island, pictures of Bayside storm surge flooding here as well. And again, water impacting structures in this area, all in this area where of course, the center moved right up through here and then inland. And on that right front side, like we saw, that is where you typically see the most significant surge, and that would be kind of right about in here. And of course, that's where we had some of the most significant surge taking place. These other barbs right here, these are damaging winds, flooding rains that we even saw as far west as Tallahassee and Crawfordville down here south of Tallahassee towards the Gulf Coast and even down towards Apalachicola. So a significant impact storm, certainly making landfall, of course, as a Category 3. What we're going to be looking at now as we focus on what's going to happen over the next several hours, we are going to be looking at a surge potential here across South Carolina into North Carolina, where we have our system, pretty close to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, about 20 miles southwest. And the winds, again, they're coming around like this out of the southeast. So we have an onshore flow happening into coastal South Carolina and into coastal North Carolina. So it doesn't take a lot, especially when you consider that we have all these little inlets here. You can see all these little river inlets here across South and North Carolina. The water kind of sneaks in there, and when the water level's already up, it's not very difficult at all to cause some surge flooding here across North Carolina and South Carolina, not even a particularly large surge happening. And you can see here that right now the water level is pretty even. We don't have any spikes happening right at the moment, but we are going to be watching this as we head through the morning hours. We still do have a 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm that is gradually making its way out into the Atlantic. It's going to kind of hold its strength. There is some upper-level wind shear that's impinging from the north and west, and that will gradually help not only push it out, but weaken the system. Also going to drag in some dry air, and that will help take this thing apart gradually as well as it moves off to the east. So as far as it goes, we're looking at 2 to 4 foot storm surge, still possible 1 to 3 feet a bit further down to the south across South Carolina. Well, the storm surge isn't only damaging homes and buildings, but vehicles too. And salt water pushing in from the Gulf has been known to cause and will cause and can cause major problems. Dr. Rick Knabb explains.
If your area has been flooded, you'll need to pay special attention to your vehicle.
Well, first thing is if you can get an idea of how flooded it was it just up to the wheels or was it halfway up the vehicle? And either way, you probably want to be careful before you just start it. So to get an idea of where the water damage is, you can usually see a dirt line along your vehicle. If it's really flooded high, I wouldn't even start it. I would just call a mechanic, have it towed there.
Even if you take these first steps, there could still be some hidden problems lurking inside.
You can use a wet vac and get it out of the carpeted area, but know that below the carpet, it's not padding like it is in your home. It's jute. It's compression of plastic and all kinds of other things. So what it does is the water stays there. And when you think you've air dried it out, you've left behind mold, mildew, potentially E. coli. Because you got to remember, you don't know what's in the water. It could even be sewage water. It could be really dangerous for your health.
And there are lots of things that can go wrong with the mechanics.
What you don't see is regular saltwater, rainwater. If it sits in deep water, this is a brake line that's brand new. And this is one that's been sitting in salt water. And the damage means that your brakes don't work. Think about fuel lines. Get from the gas tank from the back to the front where your engine is. That's going to be a problem. because it could potentially cause a fire. These are the kind of things that are plainly obvious, but what isn't is airbags not deploying if the water was up high enough, or anti-lock brake systems not working. All those safety features that are in play can stop at any time or not even function.
Ultimately, if you have concerns after your vehicle is flooded, it's best not to drive it. Have it checked by a certified ASE technician or your local qualified mechanic.
Holy, that car's flying! What the?
Yeah, insane video here. This was eye-catching. You kind of got to wait a second before you pick it up if you look toward the right. And this is basically how strong some of the winds were gusting yesterday. This happened on a highway in Goose Creek in South Carolina. Could you imagine driving and seeing cars flying? Yeah, well, in this case, this is what it was. This is right outside of Charleston when Idalia was pushing through. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper informing people to heed to the warnings and have a plan in place.
We expect winds, rain, and flooding to continue to impact our state even into Saturday. I encourage people to listen to local officials and make sure you have a plan if you're in an area with a flood risk. Prepare an emergency kit if you don't have one. This is the first storm of the season, and it may not be the last.
And we do have an evolution of this system as named on Sunday as a tropical storm with 40-mile-per-hour maximum sustained winds. And Monday becomes a strong tropical storm hurricane by Tuesday. And by Wednesday, a major hurricane and a Category 4 storm here, 130-mile-per-hour maximum sustained winds. That was the strongest that Idalia got. Weakened just before landfall, the advisory just before landfall at 125, but still a powerful Category 3 hurricane heading into the Big Bend area now. In its wake, we're left with power outages. So many customers here, which a customer represents a household, being affected, almost 150,000 in Florida. And again, you can multiply that by, the average household's maybe 4 people, plenty of people and actual individuals without power. Georgia, 130,000 plus. South Carolina, almost 39,000. You can see Madison, Perry, even around Tallahassee, we've still got a few thousand people without power, even getting into South Georgia. A lot of this was from wind damage as the center basically went up in that direction. A couple 10,000s up to 10,000 plus, still without power here. And then in South Carolina, a spotty, but again, still you're looking at 10, 20, 30,000 customers without power. And if you are without power, here's kind of some rules or some safety tips. Operate generators outdoors. Don't use candles or any open flames. Stay away from down power lines and have a plan to power life-sustaining medical equipment too. So those are some things you should continue to think about. And now here's some of the peak wind gusts that may have caused some of these outages. South Tybee Island, 69 miles per hour. So didn't get to hurricane force wind gusts in Georgia, but still strong enough to cause damage. Down at Fripp Island in South Carolina, 54 miles an hour. And Fort Sumter, you came in at 51. And still some wind right now, but staying close to 40 miles per hour. Charleston, that's tropical storm force 2, just less than tropical storm force. The closer to the center we are, obviously further away, you're looking at gusts maybe to 20 plus, but for the most part, strongest winds coming onshore as we go through this morning. And as we get into the afternoon, watch Hatteras out here through the morning and the afternoon hours. I want to show this quick. We're going to roll through midday and then later, maybe some stronger winds, potentially up to 75 miles per hour mark in some of those gusts.
Well, not only North Carolina, Ray, it'll be a long and lengthy cleanup for the Cedar Key area as well. Here's a look at some of the damage residents will be faced with when they return home. And you can see here that we have structural damage, gas station awnings down, debris strewn everywhere, plywood everywhere. This is what's really dangerous in the aftermath of these hurricanes, the post-storm environment. You have debris all over the place, and some of the debris you can't even see, especially as the sun goes down. It's dark, there's no power. So this can be very dangerous. That's why emergency management officials, when they tell you to wait to come back or whatever, you really should, because this is the kind of thing we're looking at here. You can see that there's debris all over the place here. You can see doors taken off the hinges, and it just stuff strewn everywhere. Walls taken off, drywall there taken off as well. So a formidable hurricane for sure. Now a tropical storm, and here's the way it all started. We go back a few days here. A tropical depression formed here on August 27th, and it kind of meandered here in the Northwest Caribbean for a little while. Waited. There was a little bit of upper level wind shear, and then once the shear backed off, this began to move north and really start to develop. as we head through the August 29th timeframe. And then when we got up into the loop current here, this very warm basin of water here across the northeastern Gulf, went up towards the Nature Coast, briefly a 4, and of course making landfall as a 3 as we headed into Wednesday morning with, again, that push of water up right towards Keaton Beach, Cedar Key getting the right front side of this hurricane, 125 miles an hour, Category 3 at Keaton Beach as it made landfall and moved inland. You can see this huge canopy of cold cloud tops moving in as well with very heavy rain and strong winds. So officially landfall Keaton Beach, winds 125 miles an hour, Cat 3, the strongest Big Bend landfall since 1896. So going back more than 100 years, 8th Gulf of Mexico major landfall since 2017. And 2017 was a year where we had a lot of trouble in not only the tropical Atlantic, but the Gulf of Mexico from hurricanes, with Irma that year and several others. And as we look at this situation now, it's moving off very quickly. Gusts were 85 miles an hour at Boosel Junction, Horseshoe Beach, 81 miles an hour, Mayo 73. You can see gusts into the 50s here, St. George and Tallahassee Airport officially gusting to 46 miles an hour. Damaging winds here as this hurricane moved inland across the Florida Big Bend area. Rainfall amounts were pretty good too. I shouldn't say good, significant. 5.5 inches of rain, Arcadia, Harbor Heights, and Dunedin getting 5 inches of rain. St. Mark's 4.38, and Madison County getting 4.12 inches. And some of that rain fell in fairly short order as well as this made landfall. So you had the very strong winds, the heavy rain taking down trees and power lines, that rain loosening the root systems and causing the trees to come down even faster, and thus all the power outages we have here across the Florida Big Bend into North Georgia, or North Florida rather, and South Georgia. Well, the Weather Channel will stay on top of the threats 24/7 with the Weather Channel streaming app. You can stay ahead of everything. You can find updates for the tropics. Stream twc.com to get the latest.
Watch the Weather Channel for ongoing coverage of Idalia. Get trusted updates on the storm only on the Weather Channel. Of the Weather Channel, now available to everyone.
This is epic!
Trusted live coverage when it matters most is now yours to stream with the Weather Channel TV app, real-time radar, and maps that let you track all the action.
Let's get into the detail.
Personalization, customization, hundreds of hours of your favorite shows, and so much more. There's never been a better way for everyone to watch the Weather Channel. Available now on these platforms. Download now to start your free 7-day trial.
All right, water from the Gulf of Mexico invading Florida neighborhoods, all thanks to Idalia. Storm slammed into the northern west side of Florida as a Category 3, and a high-end Category 3 at that, yesterday morning. Seen plenty of damage here. In through areas around Tampa. Water coming up, had record water rise in parts of Tampa Bay, and trees down, power out. Power still out for a couple 100,000, and hopefully we'll start seeing what looks to be power coming back on here pretty quickly. Well, hurricanes can kill and injure with powerful winds, flooding, and destructive storm surge, but about 44%, nearly half of all hurricane-related deaths are classified as indirect, meaning many of these tragedies happen after the storm has passed. Meteorologist Felicia Combs shares some advice that could save your life.
The storm has passed.
The weird thing is this is the back of the house. So the house has turned 300 or 180 degrees.
The damage is done.
Preparing for hurricanes is not just ensuring that you are safe during the storm. It is preparing to survive in the potentially nasty and lengthy aftermath.
This has got to be extremely stressful.
It is.
With the stress of the storm itself and the physical strain of a long recovery, about a third of indirect hurricane deaths are actually caused by heart attacks.
There's a lot of stress. A lot of stress.
Preparation before the storm can reduce some of this stress.
Coordinate with your pharmacist or your doctor if you're going to need prescriptions filled. But to avoid the stress level is to definitely to prepare for it.
After the storm, take cleanup slow, easy, and ask for help, especially if you have a pre-existing condition.
In the aftermath of a storm, accidents are very common. Vehicle accidents on slick roads or roads that are covered in debris, or accidents in the recovery and cleanup, people falling and hitting their heads.
Because we don't have any water and no electricity.
Post-storm power outages can be deadly in many ways. Downed but still live power lines can electrocute. Assume all power lines are live and keep your distance.
Another very dangerous ramification of extended massive power outages after hurricane is people running generators in an unsafe manner and entire families being wiped out by carbon monoxide poisoning.
Keep generators, camp stoves, and grills outside and at least 20 feet away from doors and windows.
So how do we lessen the dangers in the aftermath of a hurricane? Number one is, before the storm, to have critical supplies on hand with a first aid kit and tools and supplies and water, all the things that you need to sustain yourself.
Just because the hurricane is over, don't assume you're safe. Because many post-hurricane dangers continue for days, even weeks after the storm.
All right, some of the scenes there from what Idalia has done, and this is where Idalia is right now. Still looking at a tropical storm here, about 20 miles southwest of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Expected to stay at 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm as we head into Thursday morning as it moves offshore south of Wilmington, and then by Thursday evening, still a 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm. The system's going to get increasingly weaker as it does move offshore gradually. Still a couple things kind of holding the strength in place. We have the very warm waters of the Gulf Stream, which are located right offshore here. Very warm water, especially this time of year, some of the warmest all season. And upper-level wind shear moving in from the west, that's going to prevent it from going back up, so to speak, as it heads out, and it will head out here. We're still looking at plenty of showers and thunderstorms here. You can see some very cold cloud tops here around Hatteras and back to the west, to the east of Raleigh, as these systems often have thunderstorms embedded within them, especially one that was this strong. And we're looking at very high rainfall rates here where we have these thunderstorms. This is where we could see 2, 3, 4 inches of rain in pretty short order. So as we wind into the wee hours of Thursday morning here, you can see the system is still formidable. It's not what it was, but it still is a tropical storm with very heavy rainfall here around Wilmington. We have some flash flood warnings just inland here across southeastern North Carolina, and very heavy rainfall now around Hatteras. Plus, we have thunder and lightning happening here, and typically, as I was just talking about, that typically brings up the rainfall rates quite a bit in some cases. This is where we could see rainfall really adding up fast here across parts of eastern North Carolina, especially around Hatteras, Ray. We can really be looking at tremendous rainfall totals, especially of a tropical nature, especially if you have thunder and lightning too.
Yeah, and as the threat continues, the Weather Channel will stay on top of Idalia 24/7 with the TWC streaming app. Here you can find updated alerts for the tropics and the temps. Go to streamtwc.com to get it for Roku, Amazon Fire, and Google TV.
And welcome back. We've seen a lot of inland flooding from Hurricane Idalia. This is southeastern Georgia, where flooding rains piled up on the streets in Statesboro.
And meteorologist Stephanie Abrams caught up with 2 Statesboro residents about their biggest concerns with Idalia.
How long have you guys lived here?
Well, I moved here in 1963, November 1963, with my parents.
With your parents. And Leroy, have you guys ever seen flooding like this?
No, never seen flood. Well, I'm from Augusta, and we just got married
Congratulations.
Well, almost 3 years.
Oh, congratulations, guys. So, Grace, why do you think it's flooding so bad? You've never seen it like this.
Well, I think it's because of the drainage problems. Because the drain on that side, on the other side of the road, it's stopped up. The drain on this side of the road, it's almost stopped up. And the water is coming from both ends of the road, this way and this way. And it can't pick it up. Plus, the ditch over there is completely stopped up.
Yeah.
And it has overflowed all the way on another lot over there. Looked like a pond.
And Tropical Storm Idalia is still causing widespread damage. I'm meteorologist Mark Thibodeau. And widespread damage continues from Florida to the Carolinas. It's not quite over just yet. Thanks for joining us. Again, I'm meteorologist Mark Thibodeau.
And I'm meteorologist Ray Stajic. We are still tracking the threat for flooding and tornadoes this morning along the East Coast as Idalia begins to move out. And Idalia lashed the Keaton Beach area as a powerful high-end Category 3 hurricane yesterday morning. Take a look at some of this damage that has been left behind. See metal roofs getting ripped off, and luckily a lot of these structures are on stilts, some of them not, and you're seeing some of the damage here with some of the awnings blown over, and certainly going to continue to see more damage as images continue to come in here as we go on through Thursday morning, and we'll start to see more of that. Even further on up the coast with the flood threat, some of the heaviest rainfall actually had come on in through parts of South Carolina and now North Carolina. So what's left? All right, a 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm as of the 2 a.m. advisory here from the Hurricane Center. 991 millibars moving northeast at 21. The center now located about 20 miles southwest of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. About to get ready, if not already, back out over open water. But very heavy rainfall now basically in through the eastern part of North Carolina. And that's why tropical storm warnings continue here for tropical storm conditions. So maybe winds 39 plus miles per hour. A lot of that's probably going to be with gusts and thunderstorms that are offshore now coming in near Morehead City. And continued with probably a weakening. If anything, it'll sustain. The Hurricane Center keeps it as 60-mile-per-hour storm because we do have some wind shear around and in the system. So that's a good thing because probably not going to see additional strengthening. Does look like, at least according to this guidance, that we do have the center now back out over open water, and you could see these bands kind of feeding in here with stronger storms. Hatteras getting some stronger winds with the thunder and lightning. Raleigh, you're just about ready to get out of the heavier rainfall, but the steadier, heavier rain and the flash flooding is on off to your east. Leftover rain showers pulling out of South Carolina. You're just about done now. Some stronger winds to 30 miles per hour at its wake, but still some flash flood warnings here. Horry and Marion counties, that's a flash flood warning. Eastern North Carolina, though, multiple warnings here, including Bladen, New Hanover, and Pender counties, Mark, with radar indicated flash flooding.
And that's going to be the main story, Ray, certainly as we head through the morning hours. Flash flooding, still some gusty winds across the area. The Big Bend of Florida, obviously having quite a big hit from this landfall in the Nature Coast area. The brunt of the Hurricane Idalia doing the damage here in Perry, Florida, a town about an hour southeast of Tallahassee. And you can see here, this is really what we worry about. You get the heavy rainfall, and that loosens the root systems, and then you get the winds coming in at the same time, so these trees just snap, especially these big pine trees. And we have a lot of very tall trees here on the Nature Coast. So as you get these strong winds coming in, they loosen the root systems and they start falling on structures. And this is why things are so dangerous. This is why if you're told to evacuate from the storm surge, mainly you do so, but certainly the strong winds can be very dangerous at the coast as well. So let's kind of recap here. We had this system move towards the Cedar Key area, a little bit northwest, Horseshoe Beach. Storm surge flooding taking place here. St. George Island as well, looking at some surge here up the coast here. Again, along and to the southeast of where that center moved ashore and to the north. That is where we saw the most surge taking place. And then back to the west, we had flooding rains. To the east here, damaging winds across central Florida, taking down power across North Florida, up into parts of southern Georgia as well. So where are we right now? Still looking at some surge potential here across southeastern South Carolina into North Carolina as well, with a potential for still some water level rise here taking place across this area as we head through the morning hours. So we're going to continue to keep an eye on this as we head through the next 24 hours as Idalia slowly moves away.
Watch the Weather Channel for ongoing coverage of Idalia. Get trusted updates on the storm only on the Weather Channel.
Welcome back. Well, several cities washed out as damage from Hurricane Idalia arrived yesterday morning. This is the damage out of Steinhatchee, Florida. And you can see here the water pushing in. That surge, that is what is so incredibly dangerous about these hurricanes. That is really the number one killer in these hurricanes is the storm surge, of course, followed by wind. And we had plenty of strong gusty winds as well with this particular system. Big trees coming down as well across much of the Nature Coast and then inland over North Florida into South Georgia as well. Well, Idalia is now a tropical storm as it passes over the Carolinas, battering the southeast, still with some heavy rain, especially in eastern North Carolina, some strong gusty winds. We've been tracking the storm's path. Meteorologist Paul Goodlow was on Florida's Gulf Coast as conditions changed drastically in minutes as a powerful storm slammed into Florida.
We're still dealing with the surge here, getting higher and higher slowly but surely. Now it's closer to 3.5 feet of surge, and it continues to rise. And we're normally about, say, 60, 70 yards from the edge of the ocean, and they even pulled back the lifeguard stand. It's going to be interesting here in Clearwater, the Tampa Bay area, all day long. You can see the stronger winds also pushing this. We're seeing, look at that, waves crashing here. We still have our high ground. We're seeing waves now crashing up to these stairs. There's at least 2 missing stairs right now, but you see the waves now kind of lashing at here. So that's that push of the water. We're talking well over a 3.5-foot surge. And now we're seeing the water rapidly rise. We've had to retreat from where we were before. This is now our second kind of movement, and we expected to do that because of the storm surge coming in. It's getting lighter here, and as people in the metro area are waking up, this is not the time to go drive around and survey the damage because the damage is yet to really peak here as this water, the surge, has yet to peak. We've had to retreat. In fact, Ben Trailer behind the camera, you can see the building across Gulfview Boulevard, which is really part of the Gulf right now. We were on the far side, the Gulf side of that building, and waves are crashing onto that building, which is about maybe 70 miles from the normal surf line. And now we're across the street. You can still see some of the sidewalk is a little on higher ground. This was not covered, not engulfed about 20 minutes ago. So that's why we keep retreating. We're fortunate. I still see lights on in all the buildings. All the street lights are still on as we speak here. But we're still dealing with these outer rain bands well away from the center. That's where the strongest winds are. Here's a piece of debris here, and you know, these things are put together with nails and screws. Now, my boots have an impenetrable sole. That's why I can still walk around here, but still cautiously. And by the way, this is salt water. That's corrosive. So if you're driving around, 2 things could happen: corrosion to your car and flat tires. Look at the Gulf of Mexico. We're looking across Gulfview Boulevard, which is part of the Gulf, and look at the white caps here and how sloppy and choppy that is. Easily, 5, 6, maybe even 8-foot waves at times slashing on shore. And it's amazing where those waves are crashing now. Easily 70, 80 yards from typically where the edge of the water is. We're more than 120 miles from the center, but we're still dealing with storm surge for much of the day here in Clearwater Beach.
Recapping Hurricane Idalia and its evolution and quickly intensifying as it got into the Gulf, but wasn't always the case. Kind of sat around here through the weekend, last weekend and into early to the week as Tropical Depression 10 meandered around just off the Yucatan and had a tough time getting going. It was fighting a little shear, but as it started evolving and moving north and strengthening just a bit, we started seeing that evolution into tropical storm status and then eventually a hurricane, but really became most impressive during the day yesterday, Wednesday, as it strengthened to a major hurricane, rapid intensification as it moved over some warm water in the Gulf of Mexico and then made that run toward landfall yesterday morning at 7:45 around the Big Bend. So it did get to a 130 Category 4 hurricane, low end, and then ended up weakening just a bit as it came on shore to a high-end Cat 3, really academic at that point, whether it was a strong Cat 3 or a low-end Cat 4. Still looking at a powerful storm with, really a lot of damage now, and the strongest Big Bend landfall since 1896, and the 8th Gulf of Mexico major landfall since 2017. So some history there, but I still don't think we've had a landfall in this area of a Cat 4 Certainly, though, we were pretty close. Rainfall, little underwhelming, 5.41 inches. Still a lot in Arcadia, but some spots I've seen a lot more up into South Georgia. And storm surge flooding, there were some records set, believe it or not, probably just because of where the storm came in. Cedar Key, 6.89, a record surge. Hermine was 6.10, the old record set back in 2016. So we did have a higher storm surge. Old Port, Tampa. Now near Tampa Bay, a record surge of 4.18 inches or 4.18 feet. The higher one broke the record from Ada back in 2020 at 3.79. So there were some records in terms of water rise and surge. Top wind reports, 80 plus miles per hour, 81 at Horseshoe Bend, down in Tallahassee, a 46 mile per hour wind gust there. It's a tropical storm force. St. George's Island had a wind gust of about 52 miles per hour. So strong winds and rain, and now all that rain and wind pushing through eastern North Carolina.
Just listen to those wicked winds whipping the Big Bend of Florida. This was in Taylor County as Hurricane Idalia was pushing through the area. I'll tell you what, this is the eye wall right here, the definition of it, moving into the area with, there you go, there's a surge coming in at the same time with it. Strong winds pushing the surge in, and it kind of all works in tandem to do the damage at the same time, and there's what it looks like afterwards. You can see the bent sign there, and you can see the trees in the distance being snapped. Definitely looking at some really tough conditions here as this storm moved in. Awnings collapsed, of course, on gas stations too, all kinds of problems. So here is what we're looking at now with this system. It's just adjacent to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina here, about 20 miles southwest. Moving off to the east, 60 mile per hour storm still expected to stay as 60 mile per hour storms. It moves off to the east, offshore of Cape Hatteras. Pressure 991 millibars, so that's come up. And you notice the motion here pretty quick, northeast at 21 miles an hour. It's going to be catching a ride aboard a trough that's moving into the eastern U.S. here, and that should help push it out pretty effectively here as we head through the next 24 hours. Still some very heavy rainfall up here across eastern North Carolina. And so this is the area we watch, especially when we start seeing some bolts of lightning showing up. That really enhances the rainfall rates very quickly here across eastern North Carolina. So I imagine we're probably going to have some flooding taking place here into the early morning hours of Thursday here as this system continues to move up. And every once in a while, we'll get a burst of wind in these rain bands. Could be tropical storm force. So we still do have a tropical storm. So we could get some sustained tropical storm force winds as well. But overall, we are going to be looking at this system moving out pretty quickly as we head through the end of the work week and then into Labor Day weekend. So good news for the beachgoers, but be careful here this weekend. We are going to have a lot of rip currents here across the Carolinas down into Georgia. And you can see here lots of lightning too. And as we know, Ray, lightning enhances the rainfall rates with these hurricanes very quickly as well.
Yeah, luckily we're seeing the last of it, and hopefully over the next few hours things kind of weakening further. They do keep it at a 60 mile per hour storm, and some of those projections for some stronger winds on the Outer Banks, we'll see. Yeah. We'll see. As the evolution of this storm certainly was pretty rapid, especially once it got into the central Gulf. And if you do have these storms that do take out your power, you do need to be careful. Meteorologist Mike Bettis has some things to remember to stay safe.
Strong storms can bring power outages, so here are a few things you can do to stay safe when the power goes out. Without power, you can break out the generator, your grill, or some other similar item, but make sure to use it outside in a well-ventilated area to avoid carbon monoxide poisoning. Carbon monoxide is an odorless and colorless gas that can be deadly. The water supply can also be compromised during a power outage, so check with local authorities on the safety of your water and boil it if recommended. According to the CDC, if the power is out for less than 4 hours, the food in your fridge is probably safe, but keep those doors closed as much as possible. But when it comes to food, when in doubt, throw it out. If the power's been out for more than a day, it's best to toss out any refrigerated medicines. If they're life-saving, use them, but get a replacement as soon as possible. If it's hot and you don't have air conditioning, look for a shelter that does, something like a mall or a store, or maybe take a cold shower. Fans alone don't really prevent heat-related illness. As with any storm, make sure you have an emergency plan and a disaster supply kit that covers you, your family, and your pets for at least 3 days. Better to be safe than sorry.
Let's get into now the evolution of our storm, Idalia, and how it became a rapidly intensifying hurricane. You got to do 35-mile-per-hour increase in wind speed in order to achieve that, and we did that. There's 24 hours between Tuesday and Wednesday, and you went from 75 miles per hour to 130 miles per hour. So that easily qualifying as an intensifying hurricane with rapid intensification. And now left over in its wake, we do have power outages, and this is the number of customers out. So customer representing one household, 143,000 plus in Florida, Georgia, about 126,000, South Carolina, almost 35,000 customers. So, quite a bit of individuals actually impacted here. And in Florida, some of the highest totals between 10 and 20,000 in these counties around Perry and Lake City. City of Tallahassee also seeing some scattered power outages. A lot of that from the wind. They had some wind gusts close to 50 miles per hour. And along the path, which was generally in that direction, plenty of power outages still in Georgia and some of those power outages in South Carolina. Also up in North Carolina, a few 10,000 up there with some of the winds and some of the rain and severe weather. So your power's out. Operate generators indoors. Do not use candles or any other open flame. Stay away from down power lines and certainly have a plan to power life-sustaining medical equipment, all things that'll keep yourself safe. Some of the peak wind gusts almost to 70 miles per hour. Storm tracker Charles Peak captured this supermoon Wednesday night.
Did you know 80% of women are struggling with hair damage? Dryness and frizz that keeps coming back could be damaged hair that can't retain moisture. You need Pantene's Miracle Rescue Deep Conditioner. It's filled with provitamins to help hair lock in moisture, visibly repairing 6 months of damage in just one use, with no weigh down. Guaranteed or your money back. For hair that looks healthy and stays healthy. If you know it's Pantene.
Also paper read.
The winds were relentless. Trees coming down. You had pieces of metal and buildings flying across. You see trees just almost disintegrating in front of you. You had power lines down all over the place.
We got a number of things that we're facing in terms of risks and hazards from this tropical system. The heavy rain, we mentioned that, the gusty winds, but also that isolated tornado threat. That continues for us, particularly as you work your way towards the coast.
More coverage on the Weather Channel all night long, so stay with us.
Idalia causing widespread damage from Florida to the Carolinas, and it's not quite over yet. Thanks for joining us. I'm meteorologist Ray Stajic.
And I'm meteorologist Mark Thibodeau. We are still tracking the threat for flooding and tornadoes early this morning along the East Coast, particularly eastern North Carolina, as Idalia begins to move out.
And Hurricane Idalia lashing the Big Bend of Florida yesterday morning with, as you can see here, some life-threatening storm surge, rough and choppy waves crashing the Gulf Coast shores. Pushing the water inland now, the deadly storm continues to threaten the Carolinas with flooding rains and storm surge. And that rain's been heavy. Some of the heaviest rain totals have come in out across South Carolina and now getting into North Carolina and causing flooding, multiple flash flood warnings in place. As the center now is trying to get back out over open water. Looks like it's almost there, may already be. 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm. That's the latest from the Hurricane Center, moving northeast at 22. Center 20 miles southwest of Myrtle Beach in South Carolina. But notice now, most of South Carolina, if not all of it, is now out of the rainfall. Heavy rain now pushing east of the Triangle here near Raleigh, getting out this way, heading toward the Outer Banks, and trying to get this rain out pretty quickly. See what kind of shape the beaches are in, right? Big holiday weekend coming up. The weather's going to be great. We'll just see what happens in the next few hours, because we still, from Kill Devil Hills and Hatteras here, Morehead City, down toward Wilmington, have tropical storm warnings in place. So tropical storm conditions either occurring or likely here, although a storm has weakened a bit because of some of the shear that's been in and around the environment. So that's one factor playing into why we're not seeing additional strengthening. But the center low's pressure here, moving out over the western Atlantic, still rotating in, though. Some of this heavier rain and thunderstorms. Haven't had any warnings over the last couple of hours, but these storms will have the potential maybe to produce some quick spin-ups or tornadoes. Again, most of the rain out of South Carolina, some gusty winds on the backside. Florence almost gusting to 30, Myrtle Beach 35. Up in North Carolina, some 30-mile-per-hour wind gusts or higher. Bladen, New Hanover, and Pender counties. These are some of the areas that do have flash flood warnings now. Kings Grant, Masonboro, Wilmington. Flooding indicated by Doppler radar here. Heavy rainfall, though we are getting less yellows in here, so maybe that's a little good news with some lessening of the rain and the wind. Not really getting to tropical storm force at last check. New Bern, 36-mile-per-hour gust. Hatteras up to 29. A little bit further north, 18 up near Elizabeth City. Tornado watch, and we've even seen a few counties taken out of this watch. But Morehead City, Jacksonville, Hatteras, the Outer Banks, you are in this tornado watch, meaning the potential still is there for some of these cells to rotate, and probably going to be in some of these bands that are trying to work on in here. So if you are paying attention, you're going to have to quickly take action, because these storms, if they do produce tornadoes, will spin up pretty quickly and usually dissolve pretty quickly too. So quick movers here as we go through 4 in the morning. More strong storms possible. A lot of the rainfall, though, starts moving through the morning hours off to the east and out over the open water of the Atlantic, and through midday it does look like we are going to see most of the rainfall go offshore, but probably still some gusty winds here on the backside as what's left of Idalia now moves out over the Atlantic Ocean and eventually goes away. But beautiful weather continuing to settle back in now in the Carolinas. But notice we do have more rain and thunderstorms coming in through parts of the Big Bend area. Showers, thunderstorms scattered around here. But further north, you get into the sunshine, and Mark, looks like we are going to be in pretty good shape.
Absolutely. Definitely well-deserved after what we've had mid to late week here. Well, this is Hurricane Idalia making landfall near Keaton Beach, Florida yesterday. You can see the surge coming in very rapidly. This place really got hit by a very big storm surge here, a double-digit storm surge. And we saw the wind pushing the water in. And, you know, keep in mind the storm surge, just to recap, is you raise the water level, then you put the large battering waves on top of that. So this is what we're looking at here with these damaging winds pushing in that high water level across the area. And we had a number of places that saw high water here across the Nature Coast here around Cedar Key and up into the Big Bend here, just east of Tallahassee. Tallahassee getting really close to some really bad weather earlier when this was making landfall, but just a bit to your east. Still, though, some very heavy rainfall and some flooding being reported here as well. And then on the front side of this, where we had these inflow bands rotating in, saw some damaging winds. You can see these showing up here across central Florida, winds gusting to tropical storm force. And that followed all the way up into north central Florida, up into southern Georgia as well, causing those power outages through Valdosta, where you took a very close hit to the leftover eye wall there. And you can see here that basically the whole area here across North Florida into southern Georgia taking a pretty big hit from this. And now, like we've been talking about, this has been a quick moving system. That's been, I guess, maybe the one piece of good news. It's moving quickly, but that also doesn't allow it to spin down as fast. So what we have left now is we have kind of a mid-grade tropical storm with storm surge warnings here from Charleston down to Beaufort, with the potential here for water level rise. You can see we didn't have Last time we looked at this, too much happening, but now we're starting to see a bit of a water level rise here again as our winds are moving in here counterclockwise around the tropical storm, pushing the water into some of these inlets here. This is what we're really going to have to watch here, these outer banks, some of these inlets as we head through the morning hours, with still the onshore flow causing the water level rise here across North Carolina into South Carolina. Could still be a problem until we finally get this tropical storm offshore and away from the United States. So what are we looking at? Maybe 1 to 3 foot water level rises. I'd say 3 is probably a stretch. 2 to 4 feet. Morehead City, and again, that 4 probably the upper range of that, especially based on what we're seeing right now. Wilmington, Myrtle Beach, Charleston still could be looking at some water level rise here and the potential for some flooding. Rainfall, that's probably going to be one of the biggest things. Could still be looking at, you can see here kind of a maximum here around Hatteras, an additional 5 to 8 inches of rainfall with a bullseye here potentially of 8 to 12 inches, and that is certainly going to cause some flooding. And what we've been seeing so far during the early morning hours here are some of these rainfall bands with thunder and lightning, and that really kind of jump starts the rainfall rates overall, really sends them up high very quickly. So flash flood warnings continue here. You can see our rainfall accumulations have been very high, close to a foot of rain here across parts of northeastern South Carolina and into parts of southwestern North Carolina, or I should say coastal southwestern North Carolina, looking at the potential here for very high rainfall totals. So this is what we're looking at as we head through this evening. We're looking at a flood watch still for much of central and eastern North Carolina, and looking at Raleigh and potentially New Bern, Wilmington, Myrtle Beach still with the potential for some additional flooding from Idalia. Well, the storm surge isn't the only thing damaging homes and buildings, but vehicles too. Salt water pushing in from the Gulf Coast could cause major problems, as Dr. Rick Knabb explains.
If your area has been flooded, you'll need to pay special attention to your vehicle.
Well, first thing is if you can get an idea of how flooded it was it just up to the wheels or was it halfway up the vehicle? And either way, you probably want to be careful before you just start it. So to get an idea of where the water damage is, you can usually see a dirt line along your vehicle. If it's really flooded high, I wouldn't even start it. I would just call a mechanic, have it towed there.
Even if you take these first steps, there could still be some hidden problems lurking inside.
You can use a wet vac and get it out of the carpeted area, but know that below the carpet, it's not padding like it is in your home. It's jute. It's compression of plastic and all kinds of other things. So what it does is the water stays there. And when you think you've air dried it out, you've left behind mold, mildew, potentially E. coli, because you got to remember, you don't know what's in the water. It could even be sewage water. It could be really dangerous for your health.
And there are lots of things that can go wrong with the mechanics.
What you don't see is regular saltwater, rainwater. If it sits in deep water, this is a brake line that's brand new. And this is one that's been sitting in salt water. And the damage means that your brakes don't work. Think about fuel lines. Get from the gas tank from the back to the front where your engine is. That's going to be a problem because it could potentially cause a fire. These are the kind of things that are plainly obvious, but what isn't is airbags not deploying if the water was up high enough, or anti-lock brake systems not working. All those safety features that are in play can stop at any time or not even function.
Ultimately, if you have concerns after your vehicle is flooded, it's best not to drive it. Have it checked by a certified ASE technician or your local qualified mechanic.
Holy, that car's flying! What the?
Yeah, some crazy video here. This was in South Carolina near Goose Creek yesterday on an interstate. The wind picking up, and you could see throwing that car and throwing it and flipping it over. As this eye-catching video gave you a description of just how strong some of the winds were gusting yesterday. And it looks like we'll continue to see the winds die down. This is right outside of Charleston while Idalia was pushing through. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper informing people to heed to the warnings and have a plan in place.
We expect winds, rain, and flooding to continue to impact our state even into Saturday. I encourage people to listen to local officials and make sure you have a plan if you're in an area with a flood risk. Prepare an emergency kit if you don't have one. This is the first storm of the season, and it may not be the last.
Had a powerful storm at that, which intensified rapidly as it started off as a named tropical storm on the 27th, that's Sunday, and by Tuesday, Wednesday, started getting to hurricane strength, and yesterday, major hurricane, Category 4 just before landfall. about 5 in the morning. But at landfall, notice we had that drop to a strong Cat 3, really not making that much of a difference of what the impacts were between a 125 or a 130 storm. Just a matter of, were we Cat 3 for the record books or were we Cat 4? It will go down as a Cat 3, but the damage done and power still out. This is the latest, and this is the number of customers in Florida. 144,000 plus, Georgia 126,000 plus, South Carolina 35,000. So a customer represents a household, so certainly a multiplier there of how many persons are actually affected by the power out. In North Florida here, just around the Big Bend area, we are seeing power outages, 10,000 plus, almost 20,000 here just west of Lake City. So plenty of people still without power. Even in Georgia, looking at up to 10,000 in many counties here. Jessup, Waycross, Brunswick, Fernandina Beach down toward the south. And in South Carolina, up to 10,000 in each of these counties here around Florence and Myrtle Beach, and then further on up a few out even in North Carolina. So when the power does go out, operate generators outdoors. Do not use candles or open flame. Stay away from down power lines. Most importantly, have a plan to power up life-sustaining medical equipment, Mark.
All right, thanks, Ray. Well, it'll be a long and lengthy cleanup for the Cedar Key area. Here's a look at some of the damage residents will be faced with when they return home. And you can see here that we have all kinds of damage here. Awning down at the gas station, just boards everywhere, air conditioning units ripped right off their support beams, and wood, windows pushed in. Certainly damage, especially the lower levels, trees. You can see there into the back of that car, these trees, they become like a projectile basically into these cars. The wind just pushes it around, almost like what you'd see in a tornado. And probably some embedded small tornadoes, I'm sure. Doors taken right off the hinges here. And that's what we were looking at as this made landfall. And imagine the water being there too. That's also what we were looking at, the flooding going along with the damage there. So to recap, this started off several days ago. Here we are on August 27th, tropical depression meandering off the Yucatan Peninsula here, western side of Cuba. It's feeling some wind shear, so not really developing too quick yet. Thunderstorms trying to get co-located with the center, not yet. But then as we move through time here, the wind shear backed off a little bit, and then this moves up into the eastern Gulf of Mexico. Very warm water here. So here we are August 28th, heading into the early evening hours. And then beyond that, that's when things really begin to take off. We now are up in the loop current here where the water's 90 degrees in some cases. Wind shear is totally away. The storm being very well ventilated. Briefly to a 4, and then of course making landfall as a 3 here near the Keaton Beach area, with the potential here for gusts, of course, into the 4 territory, but still making landfall as a 3. Keaton Beach, lots of storm surge flooding on the southeast side of this, where that water comes up on that eastern side, the weathery side of the hurricane, if you will. So 125 miles an hour officially, Keaton Beach, Category 3 for the landfall. Strongest Big Bend landfall since 1896, the 8th Gulf of Mexico major landfall since 2017. Of course, 2017 was an area that had a lot of Gulf and Atlantic hurricanes. And again, moving off to the northeast, winds gusting 85 miles an hour. In some areas, Horseshoe Beach, 81 miles an hour, Mayo, 73, St. George Island, 52, into the mid-40s at Tallahassee Airport. Certainly some very gusty conditions there. If the center had been a bit further west, the weather could have been a lot worse in Tallahassee at landfall. So Arcadia, over 5 inches of rain. Harbor Heights, 5 inches. And a lot of this rain that we're looking at here, a lot of this fell in pretty short order. It didn't happen over hours and hours. It happened in a couple hours. The storm jetted inland over the Big Bend area of Florida. So here's what we're looking at historically, and we were looking at some pretty significant storm totals and surge totals here above dry ground with this particular system. So definitely one for the books here for sure. Well, the Weather Channel will stay on top of the threats 24/7 with the Weather Channel streaming app. Here you can find updated alerts for the tropics and the temps. Go to streamtwc.com to get it for Roku, Amazon, Fire, and Google TV. And of course, remember to download the free Odyssey app so you can listen to the Weather Channel's live coverage to keep you safe if you can't get to your TV. And we're going to leave you now with North Topsail Beach, North Carolina live here. You can kind of see the camera moving around a little bit. Still have some gusty winds going on here. Occasionally we're seeing some squally type rains move through here as well.
Watch the Weather Channel for ongoing coverage of Idalia. Get trusted updates on the storm only on the Weather Channel. The Weather Channel, now available to everyone.
This is epic!
Trusted live coverage when it matters most is now yours to stream with the Weather Channel TV app, real-time radar, and maps that let you track all the action.
Let's get into the details.
Personalization, customization, hundreds of hours of your favorite shows, and so much more. There's never been a better way for everyone to watch the Weather Channel. Available now on these platforms. Download now to start your free 7-day trial.
This video showing water from the Gulf of Mexico invading Florida neighborhoods. All thanks to Idalia, the storm slammed the northern west side of Florida as a Category 3 hurricane yesterday morning. Was briefly a Category 4 just before landfall and then weakened just a bit. Well, hurricanes can kill and injure with powerful winds, flooding, and destructive storm surge. But about 44%, nearly half of all hurricane-related deaths, are classified as indirect, meaning many of these tragedies happen after the storm has passed. Meteorologist Felicia Combs shares some advice that could save your life.
The storm has passed.
The weird thing is this is the back of the house. So the house has turned 300 or 180 degrees.
The damage is done.
Preparing for hurricanes is not just ensuring that you are safe during the storm. It is preparing to survive in the potentially nasty and lengthy aftermath.
This has got to be extremely stressful.
It is.
With the stress of the storm itself and the physical strain of a long recovery, about a third of indirect hurricane deaths are actually caused by heart attacks.
There's a lot of stress.
Preparation before the storm can reduce some of this stress.
Coordinate with your pharmacist or your doctor if you're going to need prescriptions filled. But to avoid the stress level is to definitely to prepare for it.
After the storm, take cleanup slow, easy, and ask for help, especially if you have a pre-existing condition.
In the aftermath of a storm, accidents are very common. Vehicle accidents on slick roads or roads that are covered in debris, or accidents in the recovery and cleanup, people falling and hitting their heads.
Because we don't have any water and no electricity.
Post-storm power outages can be deadly in many ways. Downed, but still live power lines can electrocute. Assume all power lines are live and keep your distance.
Another very dangerous ramification of extended massive power outages after hurricane is people running generators in an unsafe manner and entire families being wiped out by carbon monoxide poisoning.
Keep generators, camp stoves, and grills outside and at least 20 feet away from doors and windows.
So how do we lessen the dangers in the aftermath of a hurricane? Number one is, before the storm, to have critical supplies on hand with a first aid kit and tools and supplies and water, all the things that you need to sustain yourself.
Just because the hurricane is over, don't assume you're safe. Because many post-hurricane dangers continue for days, even weeks after the storm.
And we continue to track Idalia right now, what's left of it, currently moving about 20 miles southwest of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. It is clipping off to the east here, and we are going to be looking at about a 60-mile-per-hour storm still in some areas, mainly in gusts here with these tropical storm force rain bands that continue to move up through Hatteras and up through Wilmington. And every once in a while, you'll see a flash of lightning here with some of this activity, and that tends to push up the rainfall rates pretty quickly when that does occur. So watching this move towards southeast coast of North Carolina, you can see here we're still seeing some lightning. Lightning has decreased a little bit, but still getting some very heavy rainfall around Hatteras. This is going to go on, I think, for a little while, through about noontime, I think, today. And then after that, we'll start to see the center shift a little bit further offshore, and eventually we'll get into much nicer weather as we head into Labor Day weekend. So we still are looking at some flash flood warnings here northwest of Wilmington, up towards Morehead City, and we'll continue to see this area get the heavy rain through the morning. And keep in mind, even though we're not looking at very bright colors, this is tropical moisture that's moving over southeastern North Carolina. So you don't have to get the really bright reds and oranges to get very heavy rainfall. This will do the job just fine right here. Looking at potentially 1 to 2 inches of rain per hour with some of these rainfall bands moving in, and it's persistent over hours and hours. You start to get the flooding till 4:15 a.m. We're looking at some flash flooding here for Duplin and Onslow counties, Half Moon, Jacksonville, potentially looking at some flooding here. So be careful here as we head through the morning hours as the sun comes up. Could find some roads here and there underwater, potentially around Jacksonville and points north and east, and some flooding taking place here across some of the southeastern parts of North Carolina as well, including Morehead City. And Beaufort looking at till 4:15 in the morning, a flash flood warning for the Morehead City area as well, up towards Atlantic. Looking at the potential here for some very heavy rainfall rates that could cause some flooding. And this continues to move up across the area. By far, the heaviest rainfall here is around Hatteras. That's where we're seeing the thunder and lightning. And that is where we could see the rainfall rates adding up to 1 to 2 to 3 inches per hour in pretty short order here across southeastern North Carolina. So still looking at a small sliver of a tornado watch till 4 a.m. We still could be looking at some spin-up tropical tornadoes in this area.
I went to bed early so I could get up early, and I got up when I knew it was high tide and things looked okay. And I laid back down, I got up again, and within 20 minutes the water came from okay to up to my step. And so I went ahead and evacuated. But this here has not receded as fast as anything else, so I'm worried about the next tide.
Well, Tropical Storm Idalia causing widespread damage from Florida to the Carolinas, and it's not quite over yet. Thanks for joining us. I'm meteorologist Mark Thibodeau.
And I'm meteorologist Ray Stajic, and we are still tracking the threat for some flooding and tornadoes this morning along the East Coast as Idalia begins to move out. A lot of that probably going to be in eastern North Carolina, but let's go back first. We're near Keaton Beach where landfall was yesterday morning at 7:45 as a Category 3, at a high-end Category 3 at that, and you can see some of the damage here. We've got roofs ripped off of homes and obviously seeing some of the walls down here. A lot of damage to property. We also had inundation of the storm surge. There was also water damage, but this was some of the wind damage that we did see from Idalia as it ripped on through the Big Bend and headed on off toward the north and east. Keaton Beach, one of the more hard-hit areas with some of the wind and some of the higher surge. So where do we go from here? Well, the story goes on, and what it's telling us is that we've got more in the way of rain, not as much wind, so it's more flooding now and maybe some water rise, especially as we get into the Outer Banks here, maybe into Pamlico Sound. Some of these low-lying areas here, probably Highway 12 will probably get some flooding, but heavy rainfall even coming out of the sky, not just the water coming in from the Atlantic, and still tropical storm warnings for many of us here, New Bern, Morehead City, down toward Myrtle Beach. But as we've been seeing, with each update for the Hurricane Center, we start to kind of erode away the far southwestern edges of some of these warnings. Getting a little sheer in here in purple. That's showing where the storm is trying to keep its act together, and it's still a 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm. We're forecast to stay that, but it likely won't get any stronger. At least that's what the Hurricane Center is thinking. But look at some of these stronger storms now starting to come on shore. You've got a little bit of red in there with the thunder and lightning and pretty heavy rainfall east of Raleigh. This is the area right now of concern and the greatest chance of seeing some additional flooding down in South Carolina. The winds gusting roughly 25 to 35 miles per hour from Florence to Charleston. Myrtle Beach getting some stronger wind gusts. But in here in North Carolina, Duplin and Onslow counties, Half Moon, Jacksonville, Piney Green, these are areas under flash flood warnings. Observe flooding now occurring here with some very heavy rainfall. So seek shelter, get to higher ground if you're in that area. Also closer to the coast in Cataract County. This is for Morehead City and Newport. We've got some flooding here from storms that have come on through, probably even some gusty winds around Atlantic with that cluster that's come on through with some thunder and lightning. And then, as we had said, the winds for the most part staying below tropical storm force, but some of these gusts to 30. Even around Raleigh seeing some gusts to 30. But as I said, it looks like just on the east side of the triangle and off toward the east is where some of the heaviest rain is. Still mark a tornado threat. We still do have this tornado watch here for some until 4 a.m.
All right, thanks, Ray. Well, check out this time lapse from one of our storm path cameras. Storm surge rushing ashore across the Nature Coast here, across the area where this hurricane made landfall. And you can see here that the water comes up very quickly in this area. This is what typically happens. This is all too common when these systems make landfall. You see the water level rising, and you notice how the waves are going on top of the area. This is water rushing ashore near Cedar Key here. You can see the palm trees getting shorter and shorter as the water gets higher and higher. And of course, then we put the waves on top of that. So a very harrowing situation here on Wednesday morning as the system made landfall with a very quick water level rise and a large battering wave situation on top of that, along with some damaging winds, hurricane force wind gusts here. And what we were looking at here is this surge happening right up here. You can see how the coast is kind of concave shaped here. So that allows the water to pile up even faster, and the water drops. It gets shallower in this area, and that also allows the water to pile up even faster here. And that's what we saw in your Steinhatchee here. Some very quick water level rises up into the Cedar Key area as well, Keaton Beach, where the actual landfall was. And lots of storm reports here with some very heavy rainfall and flooding, possible tornado here. We see the red indicator in this area with this system on the front side of the storm where we would see these tropical tornadoes. That's what was happening there. Now, as we head through the next 24 hours, we are going to be looking at mainly through this evening across eastern North Carolina, the potential for some very heavy rainfall. We see the yellow here. That could be potentially rainfall amounts that are approaching 5 inches here across the Outer Banks of North Carolina. So the storm is still not over yet. We still could be looking at flooding. We still, at least for the next couple hours, some tropical tornadoes.
With the Pizza Hut Big Dinner Box, however you want a dinner, we got.
Watch the Weather Channel for ongoing coverage of Idalia. Get trusted updates on the storm only on the Weather Channel.
Welcome back. Well, several cities washed out as damage from Hurricane Idalia arrived yesterday morning. This is a damage out of Steinhatchee, Florida. And you can see here the water pushing in. That surge, that is what is so incredibly dangerous about these hurricanes. That is really the number one killer in these hurricanes is the storm surge, of course, followed by wind. And we had plenty of strong gusty winds as well with this particular system. Big trees coming down as well across much of the Nature Coast and then inland over North Florida into South Georgia as well. Well, Idalia is now a tropical storm as it passes over the Carolinas, battering the southeast, still with some heavy rain, especially in eastern North Carolina, some strong gusty winds. We've been tracking the storm's path. Meteorologist Paul Goodlow was on Florida's Gulf Coast as conditions changed drastically in minutes as a powerful storm slammed into Florida.
We're still dealing with the surge here, getting higher and higher slowly but surely. Now it's closer to 3.5 feet of surge, and it continues to rise. And we're normally about, say, 60, 70 yards from the edge of the ocean, and they've even pulled back the lifeguard stand. It's going to be interesting here in Clearwater, the Tampa Bay area, all day long. You can see the stronger winds also pushing this. We're seeing, look at that, waves crashing here. We still have our high ground. We're seeing waves now crashing up to these stairs. There's at least 2 missing stairs right now, but you see the waves now kind of lashing at here. So that's that push of the water. We're talking well over a 3.5-foot surge.
And now we're seeing the water rapidly rise. We've had to retreat from where we were before. This is now our second kind of movement, and we expected to do that because of the storm surge coming in.
It's getting lighter here, and as people in the metro area are waking up, this is not the time to go drive around and survey the damage because the damage has yet to really peak here as this water, the surge, has yet to peak. We've had to retreat. In fact, Ben Trailer behind the camera, you can see the building across Gulfview Boulevard, which is really part of the Gulf right now. We were on the far side, the Gulf side of that building, and waves are crashing onto that building, which is about maybe 70 miles from the normal surf line. And now we're across the street. You can still see some of the sidewalk is a little on higher ground. This was not covered, not engulfed about 20 minutes ago. So that's why we keep retreating. We're fortunate. I still see lights on in all the buildings. All the street lights are still on as we speak here. But we're still dealing with these outer rain bands well away from the center. That's where the strongest winds are.
Here's a piece of debris here, and these things are put together with nails and screws. Now, my boots have an impenetrable sole. That's why I can still walk around here, but still cautiously. And by the way, this is salt water. That's corrosive. So if you're driving around, two things can happen: corrosion to your car and flat tires. Look at the Gulf of Mexico. We're looking across Gulfview Boulevard, which is part of the Gulf, and look at the white caps here and how sloppy and choppy that is. Easily, 5, 6, maybe even 8-foot waves at times slashing on shore. And it's amazing where those waves are crashing now. Easily 70, 80 yards from typically where the edge of the water is. We're more than 120 miles from the center, but we're still dealing with storm surge for much of the day here in Clearwater Beach.
Recapping Hurricane Idalia and its evolution, and quickly intensifying as it got into the Gulf, but wasn't always the case. Kind of sat around here through the weekend, last weekend and into early to the week as Tropical Depression 10 meandered around just off the Yucatan and had a tough time getting going. It was fighting a little shear, but as it started evolving and moving north and strengthening just a bit, we started seeing that evolution into tropical storm status and then eventually a hurricane, but really became most impressive during the day yesterday, Wednesday, as it strengthened to a major hurricane, rapid intensification as it moved over some warm water in the Gulf of Mexico and then made that run toward landfall yesterday morning at 7:45 around the Big Bend. So it did get to a 130 Category 4 hurricane, low end, and then ended up weakening just a bit as it came on shore to a high-end Cat 3, really academic at that point, whether it was a strong Cat 3 or a low-end Cat 4. Still looking at a powerful storm with, really a lot of damage now, and the strongest Big Bend landfall since 1896, and the 8th Gulf of Mexico major landfall since 2017. So some history there, but I still don't think we've had a landfall in this area of a Cat 4. Certainly, though, we were pretty close. Rainfall, little underwhelming, 5.41 inches. Still a lot in Arcadia, but some spots I've seen a lot more up into South Georgia. And storm surge flooding, there were some records set, believe it or not, probably just because of where the storm came in. Cedar Key, 6.89, a record surge. Hermine was 6.10, the old record set back in 2016. So we did have a higher storm surge. Old Port, Tampa. Now near Tampa Bay, a record surge of 4.18 inches or 4.18 feet. The higher one broke the record from Ada back in 2020 at 3.79. So there were some records in terms of water rise and surge. Top wind reports, 80 plus miles per hour, 81 at Horseshoe Bend, down in Tallahassee, a 46 mile per hour wind gust there. It's a tropical storm force. St. George's Island had a wind gust of about 52 miles per hour. So strong winds and rain, and now all that rain and wind pushing through eastern North Carolina.
Did you know one of Nissan's EVs survived the North Pole?
Or of the Weather Channel, now available to everyone.
This is epic!
Trusted live coverage when it matters most is now yours to stream with the Weather Channel TV app, real-time radar, and maps that let you track all the action. Available now on these platforms. Download now to start your free 7-day trial.
More dramatic images out of Florida as Idalia pummeled into the Sunshine State as a Category 3 storm. This was a storm surge in Horseshoe Beach yesterday. And you can see here it's just about ready to take that mobile home right off its foundation. And water lapping up here on the side here, the water level rising, the winds pushing the waves in, the waves and the water moving in, the water rising, the waves pushing in at the same time. All kinds of debris in this water, just not safe at all. Certainly don't want to be out in this. You don't want to be anywhere near it. That's why when officials say to evacuate, always a good idea, because you can get into a dangerous situation, frankly, very quickly here. Well, here's what's left of Idalia. We are looking at the center near Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. It's a tropical storm, 60 miles an hour, moving off to the east, northeast, at 21 miles an hour, so it's not going to waste a lot of time here. It's going to be moving out pretty quickly, and you can see most of the weather is up on the northeast side here, getting a little lopsided here in terms of the weather, because we have an upper level trough that's coming in from the mid-Atlantic states, and that's kind of shearing the storm a little bit. So that's going to help it not get any stronger. But then again, the warm waters that sit over the Gulf Stream here are going to help kind of maintain it, I think, for a little while, at least as it moves to the east, and keeping it at about a 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm. You can still see we have some thunder and lightning here on the Outer Banks. That's kind of enhancing the rainfall rates. Still a storm, certainly to be aware of here as it moves across eastern North Carolina with some very heavy rainfall and some gusty winds. You can see here thunder and lightning this morning. If you're waking up early here in Hatteras, you're waking up to thunder and lightning and tropical downpours. And that's the kind of rain that can flood pretty quickly here. Some flash flood warnings here officially for parts of southeastern North Carolina, Duplin and Onslow counties till 7:15 a.m. Radar indicated Half Moon, Jacksonville in the path of this particular flooding. And then you can see here in Atlantic Beach, the lightning showing up here a little bit. Some bolts on the ocean here as we wake up this morning, with the potential here for some very heavy rainfall, leading to some flash flooding as well. And further up to the north, rainfall moving up, advancing towards Elizabeth City. And we're going to see this hang around probably through at least midday. Potentially here with our system still leaving us kind of a limited potential for a few severe storms that might produce a couple isolated tornadoes here near the Kill Devil Hills and Swan Quarter area of southeastern North Carolina. Ray?
All right, Mark. And yeah, luckily we're losing that severe weather threat, and
yes.
haven't had one warning since 1 a.m. this morning when we got on. Hopefully that trend will continue.
Very good news.
Yeah, and when we do get severe storms, occasionally power can go out. We please ask you to be careful. Meteorologist Mike Bettis has some things to remember to stay safe.
Strong storms can bring power outages, so here are a few things you can do to stay safe when the power goes out. Without power, you can break out the generator, your grill, or some other similar item, but make sure to use it outside in a well-ventilated area to avoid carbon monoxide poisoning. Carbon monoxide is an odorless and colorless gas that can be deadly. The water supply can also be compromised during a power outage, so check with local authorities on the safety of your water and boil it if recommended. According to the CDC, if the power is out for less than 4 hours, the food in your fridge is probably safe, but keep those doors closed as much as possible. But when it comes to food, when in doubt, throw it out. If the power's been out for more than a day, it's best to toss out any refrigerated medicines. If they're life-saving, use them, but get a replacement as soon as possible. If it's hot and you don't have air conditioning, look for a shelter that does, something like a mall or a store, or maybe take a cold shower. Fans alone don't really prevent heat-related illness. As with any storm, make sure you have an emergency plan and a disaster supply kit that covers you, your family, and your pets for at least 3 days. Better to be safe than sorry.
Power out and power outages hopefully start to get better here as we head through the coming days. Probably going to take a while here in Florida, 143,650, and that's customers representing a household. Still without power, Georgia 118, South Carolina about 35,000 plus. So almost 300,000 households right now without power across the southeastern U.S. Many of them here in North Florida, Lake City to Perry, out toward Madison and Tallahassee, into Georgia, southeast Georgia. A lot of this from wind damage, as we did see a hurricane go across South Georgia, Idalia, producing some of these power outages. Up near Savannah, 10 to 20,000 customers without power. And into South Carolina, we do have some of these numbers approaching about 10,000. That does include Myrtle Beach and out near Orangeburg here. Some of that power is out and will continue to do so. And when we do get these power outages, these are kind of like some safety things to consider. Operate generators outdoors. Do not use candles or any other open flames. Stay away from down power lines and have a plan to power some of your life-sustaining medical equipment. Always good things to remember when your power does go out. So we'll continue to keep you updated. Coming up in another hour, looking at Raleigh right now, rain east of you, improving weather through the morning. And for what we're seeing, Idalia causing widespread damage in parts of Florida and into the Carolinas, and just not quite over yet. Thanks for joining us. I'm meteorologist Ray Stajic.
And I'm meteorologist Mark Thibodeau. We are still tracking the threat for flooding and some risk of isolated tornadoes, mainly across eastern North Carolina, as Idalia begins to move out.
And as a hurricane, Idalia lashed the Big Bend of Florida Wednesday morning with life-threatening storm surge. Rough and choppy waves crashing the Gulf Coast shores, pushing the water inland. Now, Idalia continues to threaten the Carolinas with flooding rainfall and storm surge. A lot of that rain now is basically out onto the eastern part of North Carolina, and heavy rain at that. But the good news is that we are at least losing some of the severe weather threat. We're really chopping away at this tornado watch that's been in effect. Rain now and flash flooding, I think, lingering effects here, and we'll continue to see what looks to be more heavy rain and some flooding around as we head on through the remaining hours of the morning and the remaining life cycle here of Idalia tropical storm. Now with 60-mile-per-hour winds. Next update coming at 5 a.m. from the Hurricane Center, moving northeast at 21. But here's the heavier rainfall. Still some stronger storms embedded in there, and within those storms there could be some stronger winds. Still got that chance of maybe getting a spin up or a brief tornado. Tropical storm warnings stay in place, but here's your radar. Here's your low pressure system here. Low pressure now out over the open water, and these bands here showing some of the stronger storms. Those are the ones more significant. Could they produce heavy rainfall? Yes. Tornado possible, but gusty winds. And if there is a wind threat right now, it would be from those stronger storms. Heavier rain inland east of Raleigh, and that rain continues to wind down pretty slowly from west to east as we head through this morning. So Dublin, Onslow counties, Half Moon, and Jacksonville, this is a flash flood warning, meaning flooding imminent or is occurring. So seek higher ground if you're not already done so. That's been in effect for a while. And this flash flood warning for Cataract County, Morehead City are in that one, along with Newport. Heavy rainfall, luckily pulling out of that warning area, but further north as you get north of Atlantic and up near Vandermeer, some heavier rainfall coming in and gusty winds. Luckily, we've kept them below or near tropical storm force. There's a gust to tropical storm force at Hatteras, Greenville, 29 miles per hour. Raleigh still at 32. So probably not causing much in the way of damage. But in this area that's in this tornado watch, that line of storms or in some of those bands that come on through, like this one and that cluster there, briefly you may get some stronger winds and maybe some minor damage, as the guidance shows us, right on target here where some of those stronger storms may be, as the center now moves out over the Atlantic and pulls away and through the Outer Banks by 2 o'clock, in that time frame, the rain moves away. The winds will still be sticking around, but maybe it's cleanup time with a big holiday weekend coming up, kind of the last hurrah for summer. Hopefully we can get the beaches cleaned on up and the damage limited here. People can get out and spend time with their friends and family. So you probably have most of Thursday afternoon, Friday, until people start coming in and get it going, hopefully, on the beaches. It's going to be a beautiful weekend. So it does look like things improve. Beautiful weather by the afternoon with low 80s. We do have showers, thunderstorms, where we did see Idalia come in along the Big Bend at temperatures in the 80s. Well, Idalia now is a tropical storm as it passes out in east of the Carolinas, battering the southeast with heavy rain, damaging winds. We've been tracking the storms, including the moments it made landfall in the Big Bend area. Meteorologist Jim Cantori was in the area as conditions changed drastically in minutes as the powerful storm slammed into Florida.
We wanted to show you storm surge, and that's exactly what I'm doing here. Brad, let's go down, look at what we've got coming in. Look at this water coming in now. It is just rushing in at the present time. We've got tropical storm conditions here. The center is about probably 55 miles or so to my west-northwest now. So it's probably at its closest point here for Cedar Key. But remember, we're still pushing that water. Huge southwest component with the wind, still pushing that water in here. And you kind of wonder with these homes across the street with the lattice, how high the water is going to get there with a forecast of 12 to 16 feet. We lost power about an hour ago, but the surge is coming in. I mean, come look at this. This is unbelievable. We're essentially surrounded by water right now. It has not stopped. But you can literally see the surge coming in. Go down to the University of Florida sign, Brad. I mean, it's just coming in waves. Just coming in waves, and it keeps piling up here. We're getting strong tropical storm force, maybe a hurricane gust, but what we're seeing is this right here, the storm surge coming in. And now what's really been interesting since the last time we talked to you guys is now that the water is high enough where you're not getting that land interface with the Gulf, the waves are just free to roll in. But look at this, just rushing in here. Absolutely incredible amounts of water, but we've got some roof damage. All right, let's show the roof here. About 3 doors down. You can see it flapping around there. It's a tin roof, and there it goes. A tremendous amount of storm surge. Pretty much in the entire Big Bend has a huge water rise right now, and even here, where I'm at in Cedar Key, we now have the record, 621. All right, 6-1 was the old record back in 2016 from Hermine. Now we've set the record at 621 here at Cedar Key. Let me show you what that means. The water has come in and almost rolled to the top of that first little overhang, which is incredible. We've actually had door damage on this first door, Brad. You can see what looks like the framing that's actually come out now. So that's the door. So there's water easily in to that first room there. So there's structural damage. As far as the eye can see here, guys, this is what we've got. Water out, still coming in, still rising here. We're going to go above the record, which is currently at 6.21 at the lattice reading. That is the new record for storm surge here in Cedar Key. There's no doubt that you're getting water in at least 2 of these homes. You start to see more and more debris kind of floating around, whether they be pom-poms, parts of docks, 2x4s. We've had some containers come through as well. We've peaked at our surge, 6.9 feet. Record surge here in the Cedar Key area at 6.9 feet. The old record with Hermine in 2016 on September 2nd was 6.1. We are now at 6.9. The problem is it doesn't matter about the numbers. We've got water in homes and businesses here.
Quite a sight there. And after the storm, crews moved in quickly to restore power in places like St. Augustine. Winds and toppled over trees were a contributing factor for the bulk of the power outages that occurred over North Florida and southern Georgia. We are looking at the history of the storm, and it's been a quick mover all along. Down trees, power lines here across the area, big trees coming down. The rain falls, it loosens the root systems, and then the winds come in and they just push those trees right over. You can see the crews there trying to get the power back on as quickly as possible. And here we had the surge here at Cedar Key, where Jim Cantori was just there showing us, and then up across this concave-shaped coastline. The water piles up very quickly. Not only does it get shallower as far as the Gulf of Mexico goes, that allows the water to pile up quicker. And because of the shape of the coastline here, that allows it just really surge in. Very, very prone to surge here. Horseshoe Beach here getting a big surge. Steinhatchee getting reports of storm surge as well. And lots of flooding and damaging wind here on the front side of this from tropical rain bands that moved in on the east side of this tropical system. And of course, now it's down to a tropical storm, still holding its own here in eastern North Carolina, still looking at some flooding. Several areas adjacent to roadway flooding here, impassable roads in some cases. Folly Beach cut off because of storm surge flooding in this area across southeastern North Carolina, back over into southeast Georgia as well. Lots of very heavy rain down I-16, just a miserable interstate to be on during the day Wednesday because of all the very heavy rainfall. And now as we look at the current scenario, we're still looking at, on top of what's happened, an additional 1 to maybe 2 inches of rainfall. You can see here a little speck of yellow here. Still could see some higher rainfall totals, but the really big totals beginning to disappear a little bit. But we've had a lot so far to deal with. 10.9 inches of rain here across parts of eastern South Carolina. 6 inches of rain. Big time totals here, 7.6 inches of rain here around Wrightsville Beach in southeastern North Carolina, and still some flood warnings around, still some flood watches around. It's kind of east of Raleigh, east of 95 here, mainly in the Outer Banks. We're still getting that persistent rainfall here around Hatteras. That's going to be a problem, I think, as we head through the morning into the early afternoon hours with this potential flooding. So we're looking at a likely setup for some flash flooding here across parts of southeastern North Carolina up towards Elizabeth City. But you can see here it's drying up pretty quickly to the west. And I do think as we go through the morning hours and towards the noontime hour, we'll start to see that drier air win out. That's going to gradually start pushing this out. By 7 a.m., still raining pretty good around Hatteras. And then as we get to 11 a.m. to noon, right around lunchtime, starting to lift this system out into the Atlantic so that by 3 p.m., we've got dry beaches here coming up for the long holiday weekend, and that's going to be great news here. Hopefully, we can get things cleaned up pretty quickly to start the long weekend here across eastern North Carolina, down across South Carolina and Georgia with the system beginning to move out. So through 10 p.m., we are still looking at some rainfall offshore here across the east of North Carolina, and we are going to be looking at the potential here for still some heavy rainfall across some areas in eastern North Carolina, but moving out pretty quickly as we head through time.
Holy, that car's flying! What the?
Yeah, insane video there. This eye-catching video giving viewers an idea of what some of these strong winds did here. This is on the interstate in Goose Creek in South Carolina, right outside of Charleston, when Idalia was pushing through. Obviously, winds enough to flip that car over. Amazing. The North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper informing people to heed to the warnings and have a plan in place.
We expect winds, rain, and flooding to continue to impact our state even into Saturday. I encourage people to listen to local officials and make sure you have a plan if you're in an area with a flood risk. Prepare an emergency kit if you don't have one. This is the first storm of the season, and it may not be the last.
Quite a storm it was, especially as it evolved over time. Took its time to get going, but on the 27th, named a tropical storm and remained for a couple of days tropical storm status until it was named a hurricane on the 29th. And then it was all over from that point forward as we got rapid intensification, which is a 35-mile-per-hour wind increase in 24 hours. And we got that and then some. There's your 24 hours. That's 25 and 30. That's 55 miles per hour in wind speed increase in 24 hours. Did weaken to a high-end Cat 3 right before landfall, but nonetheless, still a very powerful major hurricane. And now in its wake, a couple 100,000 customers left without power here. Most in Florida, 143 and change. And this is the area here, North Florida. In yellow, probably 10 to 20 in each of these counties, maybe a little bit more here as you go just west of Lake City. Hopefully, we get that power turned on pretty quickly. Even in Georgia, a few 10,000 out. And in South Carolina, we do have power out still for some, even getting into parts of North Carolina now, too, as the center kind of rolled pretty close to I-95 and now pushing out offshore. So damage done here with this tropical storm now. And when you do get these power outages, we do want people to operate generators outdoors. Don't use candles or any other open flame, and stay away from down powered lines, and have a plan to at least have your life-saving power equipment, your life-sustaining medical equipment, have a power source for them too.
All right, thanks, Ray. It'll be a long and lengthy cleanup for the Cedar Key area. Here's what some of the damage looked like and what residents will be facing when they return home. You can see here awnings torn down on gas stations, just timber, debris just about everywhere, trees down, fences knocked over. And you can see just there's boards, probably nails in the boards, doors, windows pushed in. This is why it's so dangerous to just head right back in before the emergency management folks clear you to go back in, because we are looking at just a very quick if the idea is you want to get back to normal as quick as possible. We want to do it safely. So as you head back into these areas to inspect your home, just be aware there still could be a lot of debris around, and certainly some hazards that you can't even see that are hidden, especially as we move towards nightfall. That's when a lot of hazards really are around that you can't even see, obviously. So tropical depression 10 develops here around August 27th, and then by 9 to 10 a.m. on the 28th, starting to see more thunderstorms gather around the center of this, now becoming Tropical Storm Idalia. And then moving up to the north here across the eastern Gulf of Mexico, strengthening pretty rapidly to a hurricane, getting away from the upper level wind shear. That's this trough, which is making the exit now. So this is starting to build in intensity, and then it's moving over the loop current here across the eastern Gulf of Mexico, where it becomes a Category 2, on to become a Category 4 briefly before a landfall then up across the Nature Coast here right around Cedar Key. So looking at a very significant system. Officially Keaton Beach, the landfall point 125 miles an hour, Category 3 hurricane, the upper end of a Category 3 too. Strongest Big Bend landfall since 1896, the 8th Gulf of Mexico major hurricane landfall since 2017, and that was a year that had many landfalls itself. And again, we're looking at 9.4 inches of rain out of Citrus Springs, Florida here. Clearwater Beach, 9.4 inches of rain. This is over the last 24 hours. These are flooding rainfall totals approaching double digits here in some cases. Cherry Lake, Florida, getting 7 inches of rain out of this over the last 24 hours. And your wind gusts here anywhere from 60 to 85 miles an hour. So certainly in a Category 1 strength. Of course, I'm sure we had some wind gusts here that were stronger. And of course, in the surge and the high waves coming in at the same time. So Idalia, 6.89 feet. Values above normal dry ground here. In other words, you look at sea level, take it up above 6 to 7 feet above that, and that is what we are looking at in terms of the surge, the amount of water coming in all at one time. 4.18, the official storm surge here for Idalia, and that puts it right near the top.
Of the Weather Channel, now available to everyone.
This is epic!
Trusted live coverage when it matters most is now yours to stream with the Weather Channel TV app, real-time radar, and maps that let you track all the action.
Let's get into the detail.
Personalization, customization, hundreds of hours of your favorite shows, and so much more. There's never been a better way for everyone to watch the Weather Channel. Available now on these platforms. Download now to start your free 7-day trial.
All right, this is Horseshoe Beach in Florida. Some of the storm damage, obviously a push of water in here from the surge. And you've got equipment from inside homes and businesses, outside of homes and businesses from storm surge, rising water, even wind damage here. And obviously going to take some time to clean all this up as now we're seeing the last of what is now a tropical storm, Idalia, pull out and away from the coast of the Carolinas. It's become more of a heavy rain and a flood threat more than anything else. But as you can see here, plenty of damage done. And now the assessment will continue, and we will continue to hopefully get these people back in order as quick as we can. Well, welcome back to our continuing coverage of Tropical Storm Idalia. And when we do get hurricanes, they can kill and injure with powerful winds, flooding, and destructive storm surge. But about 44%, nearly half of all hurricane-related deaths are classified as indirect, meaning many of these tragedies can happen after the storm has passed. Meteorologist Felicia Combs shares some advice that could save your life.
The storm has passed.
The weird thing is this is the back of the house. So the house has turned 300 or 180 degrees.
The damage is done.
Preparing for hurricanes is not just ensuring that you are safe during the storm. It is preparing to survive in the potentially nasty and lengthy aftermath.
This has got to be extremely stressful.
It is.
With the stress of the storm itself and the physical strain of a long recovery, about a third of indirect hurricane deaths are actually caused by heart attacks.
There's a lot of stress.
Preparation before the storm can reduce some of this stress.
Coordinate with your pharmacist or your doctor if you're going to need prescriptions filled. But to avoid the stress level is to definitely to prepare for it.
After the storm, take cleanup slow, easy, and ask for help, especially if you have a pre-existing condition.
In the aftermath of a storm, accidents are very common. Vehicle accidents on slick roads or roads that are covered in debris, or accidents in the recovery and cleanup, people falling and hitting their heads.
Because we don't have any water and no electricity.
Post-storm power outages can be deadly in many ways. Downed but still live power lines can electrocute. Assume all power lines are live and keep your distance.
Another very dangerous ramification of extended massive power outages after hurricane is people running generators in an unsafe manner and entire families being wiped out by carbon monoxide poisoning.
Keep generators, camp stoves, and grills outside and at least 20 feet away from doors and windows.
So how do we lessen the dangers in the aftermath of a hurricane? Number one is, before the storm, to have critical supplies on hand with a first aid kit and tools and supplies and water, all the things that you need to sustain yourself.
Just because the hurricane is over, don't assume you're safe. Because many post-hurricane dangers continue for days, even weeks after the storm.
Yeah, those down power lines we just saw, those can be extraordinarily dangerous. Idalia, here's what's happening with it right now. Near Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, still a 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm moving off to the east-northeast. Expected to stay a 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm as we head through today. Pressure 991 millibars, northeast 21 miles an hour. So the good news is it is moving. It's not sitting in one spot. And we are going to be looking at some very heavy rainfall here still around Hatteras and points south and points north, maybe getting up into southeast Virginia here as it moves off to the northeast at 21 miles an hour. We're starting to see the thunderstorms kind of drop off a little bit, so that's good. That means the rainfall rates might be coming down a little bit. Still, though, a formidable storm moving up here across parts of eastern North Carolina. You can see here the rain bands moving up towards Hatteras. It's been raining actually pretty good here for a while here across southeastern North Carolina. Very persistent rainfall with thunder and lightning, so I imagine we're getting some pretty high rainfall totals up here across the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And still Duplin, Onslow County, still 7:15 a.m., including Half Moon, Jacksonville, looking at a flash flood warning for the potential of additional rainfall here up through Atlantic Beach, Beaufort, Morehead City, 7:15 a.m. Observe tag here. That means we are looking at the potential for some pretty significant flooding here around the Morehead City area. And you can see that rainfall extends far to the north here, up to Elizabeth City, over to Hatteras again, down to Morehead City, as we see the eastern side of the storm getting kind of lopsided now because the wind shear is coming in from the west, starting to push it out and weaken it a little bit. But look at what it has done so far. 11.8 inches of rain here, northeastern South Carolina, 3 inches of rain further back to the west, 6.1. And still raining here in Hatteras with 6+ inch rainfall totals nearby. But that just phenomenal rainfall totals here across northeastern South Carolina and some very serious flooding, too. Stay safe out there. And Tropic Storm Idalia causing widespread damage from Florida to the Carolinas. It's not quite over just yet. Thanks for joining us. I'm meteorologist Mark Thibodeau.
And I'm meteorologist Ray Stajic, and we are still tracking the threat for more flooding, maybe a few tornadoes this morning along the east coast of North Carolina as Idalia begins to move on out. But it had its impact, and quite significant in some spots. We're here at Keaton Beach, just about where we saw landfall. It's where it officially was as a high-end Category 3 hurricane yesterday morning. What's left behind? Well, what you would expect with estimated winds at 125 miles per hour awnings blown down, a metal roof was blown off, trees down. And certainly damage to buildings and homes and vehicles and mobile homes, just about everything you probably would expect here when you get a landfalling storm, and nonetheless a landfalling Category 3 hurricane. Briefly a Cat 4, but just before it made landfall, did weaken to a Cat 3. But either way, you could see here trees swaying in the wind, and some of those trees ended up getting snapped and the damage going even inland into South Georgia. So what's left? Well, what's left is basically heavy rain and a flood threat. There is a severe weather threat, especially here out near the Outer Banks. Some of those storms now getting a bit stronger, but the 2 a.m. advisory is still a 60 mile per hour, kind of mid-grade tropical storm moving northeast at 21. Tropical storm warnings for now stay in place. Myrtle Beach up toward the Outer Banks. And as I mentioned, really loaded here on the north and the northeast side of the center. And these bands coming in, actually over the last few scans there, the radar, looking a little bit more impressive with very heavy rainfall around Hatteras and some gusty winds. Probably going to see that water coming across Highway 12 and into Pamlico Sound, and going to see that water rise or that surge come in. And it's from water that's come out of the sky. We've got flash flood warnings, Half Moon, Jacksonville, Piney Green. You are in that flash flood warning. And also now in Morehead City and Newport, observe flash flooding there. Luckily, it looks like a lot of that rain is pulling away. But here's a bigger picture, and you can see the winds for now have been just about maxing out with gusts to tropical storm force. We'll see what the little clusters of thunderstorms do, as we are seeing maybe some stronger storms trying to develop here, Mark.
All right, thanks a lot, Ray. Yeah, the Big Bend of Florida felt the brunt of Hurricane Idalia. Here's a look at the damage done in Perry, Florida, a town about an hour southeast of Tallahassee. And you can see here trees into homes. This is what we really get concerned about. Even if you're not looking at direct structural damage, which means the wind actually taking the structure apart, these big trees fall onto homes. And this is a huge hazard in these tropical systems as you get the heavy rainfall that loosens the root systems and they fall into power lines, onto houses, and the situation just escalates the danger very quickly. You can see here walls knocked down. So just a real mess here across parts of North Florida with the Idalia moving into the area, dropping trees, power lines across the area as well. And as far as the flood and the surge that took place with this, here across this nature coast here, the Big Bend of Florida, Horseshoe Beach, a big storm surge here, and up to the north now, what we're looking at here is around the Folly Beach area, reporting a big surge here as well, and potentially some tornadic activity here across parts of southeastern North Carolina. And the city of Charleston has closed the exit ramp off US 17 onto St. Andrews Boulevard. Very important there due to coastal flooding here across parts of South Carolina. We're going to continue to see some of these water level rises taking place, I think, through the morning hours into parts of eastern North Carolina, as we still are looking at kind of an onshore flow moving up here across parts of southeastern North Carolina, with that flow coming in from the south and east. And on top of that, another 1 to maybe as much as 4 inches of rain here across parts of eastern North Carolina, which certainly could cause some additional flooding. That's in addition to what we've seen already, and it has been a very significant rainfall here across eastern North Carolina. 10.6 inches here across parts of northeastern South Carolina. The maximum right about in here, we had some transverse bands parked right overhead. That's tropical rain bands moving in, producing some very, very heavy rainfall. 7.5 inches southeastern North Carolina, 5 inches down to the south and west. The amounts get lighter as you head back to the west, but you get the general idea here. And now we are looking at a flood watch that continues mainly across the Outer Banks here, but back to the west towards 95 as well, because we've had a lot of rainfall here. So any additional rainfall is going to aggravate the situation and cause potentially additional flooding problems. So talking about a likely chance of flooding here, especially around Elizabeth City and at Nags Head down to Hatteras, and then back to the west, a good chance we could see some additional flooding, assuming we get some additional heavy rainfall.
Watch the Weather Channel for ongoing coverage of Idalia. Get trusted updates on the storm only on the Weather Channel.
Welcome back. Well, several cities washed out as damage from Hurricane Idalia arrived yesterday morning. This is a damage out of Steinhatchee, Florida. And you can see here the water pushing in. That surge, that is what is so incredibly dangerous about these hurricanes. That is really the number one killer in these hurricanes is the storm surge, of course, followed by wind. And we had plenty of strong gusty winds as well with this particular system. Big trees coming down as well across much of the Nature Coast and then inland over North Florida into South Georgia as well. Well, Idalia is now a tropical storm as it passes over the Carolinas, battering the southeast, still with some heavy rain, especially in eastern North Carolina, some strong gusty winds. We've been tracking the storm's path. Meteorologist Paul Goodlow was on Florida's Gulf Coast as conditions changed drastically in minutes as a powerful storm slammed into Florida.
We're still dealing with the surge here, getting higher and higher slowly but surely. Now it's closer to 3.5 feet of surge, and it continues to rise. And we're normally about, say, 60, 70 yards from the edge of the ocean, and they even pulled back the lifeguard stand. It's going to be interesting here in Clearwater, the Tampa Bay area, all day long. You can see the stronger winds also pushing this. We're seeing, look at that, waves crashing here. We still have our high ground. We're seeing waves now crashing up to these stairs. There's at least 2 missing stairs right now, but you see the waves now kind of lashing at here. So that's that push of the water. We're talking well over a 3.5-foot surge. And now we're seeing the water rapidly rise. We've had to retreat from where we were before. This is now our second kind of movement, and we expected to do that because of the storm surge coming in. It's getting lighter here, and as people in the metro area are waking up, this is not the time to go drive around and survey the damage, because the damage is yet to really peak here as this water, the surge, has yet to peak. We've had to retreat. In fact, Ben Trailer behind the camera, you can see the building across Gulfview Boulevard, which is really part of the Gulf right now. We were on the far side, the Gulf side of that building, and waves are crashing onto that building, which is about maybe 70 miles from the normal surf line. And now we're across the street. You can still see some of the sidewalk is a little on higher ground. This was not covered, not engulfed about 20 minutes ago, so that's why we keep retreating. We're fortunate. I still see lights on in all the buildings. All the street lights are still on as we speak here, but we're still dealing with these outer rain bands well away from the center. That's where the strongest winds are. Here's a piece of debris here, and these things are put together with nails and screws. Now, my boots have an impenetrable sole. That's why I can still walk around here, but still cautiously. And by the way, this is salt water. That's corrosive. So if you're driving around, 2 things can happen: corrosion to your car and flat tires. Look at the Gulf of Mexico. We're looking across Gulfview Boulevard, which is part of the Gulf, and look at the white caps here and how sloppy and choppy that is. Easily, 5, 6, maybe even 8-foot waves at times slashing on shore. And it's amazing where those waves are crashing now. Easily 70, 80 yards from typically where the edge of the water is. We're more than 120 miles from the center, but we're still dealing with storm surge for much of the day here in Clearwater Beach.
Recapping Hurricane Idalia and its evolution, and quickly intensifying as it got into the Gulf, but wasn't always the case. Kind of sat around here through the weekend, last weekend and into early to the week as Tropical Depression 10 meandered around just off the Yucatan and had a tough time getting going. It was fighting a little shear, but as it started evolving and moving north and strengthening just a bit, we started seeing that evolution into tropical storm status and then eventually a hurricane, but really became most impressive during the day yesterday, Wednesday, as it strengthened to a major hurricane, rapid intensification as it moved over some warm water in the Gulf of Mexico and then made that run toward landfall yesterday morning at 7:45 around the Big Bend. So it did get to a 130 Category 4 hurricane, low end, and then ended up weakening just a bit as it came on shore to a high-end Cat 3, really academic at that point, whether it was a strong Cat 3 or a low-end Cat 4. Still looking at a powerful storm with, really a lot of damage now, and the strongest Big Bend landfall since 1896, and the 8th Gulf of Mexico major landfall since 2017. So some history there, but I still don't think we've had a landfall in this area of a Cat 4. Certainly, though, we were pretty close. Rainfall, little underwhelming, 5.41 inches. Still a lot in Arcadia, but some spots I've seen a lot more up into South Georgia. And storm surge flooding, there were some records set, believe it or not, probably just because of where the storm came in. Cedar Key, 6.89, a record surge. Hermine was 6.10, the old record set back in 2016. So we did have a higher storm surge. Old Port, Tampa. Now to Tampa Bay, a record surge of 4.18 inches or 4.18 feet. The higher one broke the record from Ada back in 2020 at 3.79. So there were some records in terms of water rise and surge. Top wind reports, 80 plus miles per hour, 81 at Horseshoe Bend, down in Tallahassee, a 46 mile per hour wind gust there. It's a tropical storm force. St. George's Island had a wind gust of about 52 miles per hour. So strong winds and rain, and now all that rain and wind pushing through eastern North Carolina.
Well, just listen to those wicked winds whipping the Big Bend of Florida. This was in Taylor County as Hurricane Idalia was pushing through. And you can see very strong wind gusts there. Wind gusts here easily up over 60 miles an hour with this. And that's the result right there. Boats pushed inland, water level rising, storm surge. Very tough stuff happening here in Taylor County. End result, 2 trees down, some bent signs, and a car stranded in the water. And you can see there additional damage occurring as a result of this very strong system making landfall earlier on Wednesday morning. Well, now, as we bring you up to the here and now, you can see the system is just offshore of North Carolina, very close to being offshore here across parts of southeastern North Carolina. Still a 60 mile per hour tropical storm. Looks like as we head through time here, it's going to be dropping down a little bit, maybe to 50 miles an hour by early Friday morning. Pressure 991 millibars. Here's the good news. It's moving out. Moving at 21 miles an hour. Still some very heavy rainfall here across southeastern North Carolina. So the hope is that by the time we get to about midday today, noon, 1 p.m. Eastern, we'll take the rain completely offshore. Still looking at some thunder and lightning occurring here too, and that is enhancing the rainfall rates around Hatteras. We've had some heavy rainfall going on now for hours here across the Outer Banks of North Carolina. So in all likelihood, we're going to probably see some additional flooding here taking place as we head through the morning hours. Still, theoretically, looking at a tropical storm warning here, Wilmington up through Morehead City to Kill Devil Hills, and still down to Myrtle Beach, a tropical storm warning. We still could see some tropical storm force wind gusts, especially as we get into some of these rain bands. Still looking at some flash flood warnings here till 7:15 a.m. Duplin, Onslow counties, Half Moon, Jacksonville could be looking at the potential for more flooding. So the hope is as we go through today, we'll see an improving situation, especially as we get to this afternoon.
Yeah, and looks like we will, and hopefully we get the beaches cleaned up. Big holiday weekend, the weather looks great, and it does look like we will see improving weather, but if the storm does take out your power, be careful. Meteorologist Mike Bettis has some things to remember to stay safe.
Strong storms can bring power outages, so here are a few things you can do to stay safe when the power goes out. Without power, you can break out the generator, your grill, or some other similar item, but make sure to use it outside in a well-ventilated area to avoid carbon monoxide poisoning. Carbon monoxide is an odorless and colorless gas that can be deadly. The water supply can also be compromised during a power outage, so check with local authorities on the safety of your water and boil it if recommended. According to the CDC, if the power is out for less than 4 hours, the food in your fridge is probably safe, but keep those doors closed as much as possible. But when it comes to food, when in doubt, throw it out. If the power's been out for more than a day, it's best to toss out any refrigerated medicines. If they're life-saving, use them, but get a replacement as soon as possible. If it's hot and you don't have air conditioning, look for a shelter that does, something like a mall or a store, or maybe take a cold shower. Fans alone don't really prevent heat-related illness. As with any storm, make sure you have an emergency plan and a disaster supply kit that covers you, your family, and your pets for at least 3 days. Better to be safe than sorry.
Get back to now the evolution of Idalia as it became a major hurricane, and it did strengthen rapidly. 35-mile-per-hour wind increase in 24 hours. That happened here between Tuesday and Wednesday. Went from a 75-mile-per-hour minimal hurricane up to a Category 4 and then briefly weakening there before it made landfall 7:45 on Wednesday morning. And now continues to unwind, but we're left with power outages and, part of the cleanup process. 142,816 in Florida, just over 116,000 in Georgia, and in South Carolina, 32,845. So plenty of people affected. Remember, those numbers indicate how many households, not actually people. So the power outages continue here out across South Georgia, even into South Carolina, part of North Carolina here. Probably be a little bit quicker in the Carolinas than it will be Georgia and especially Florida to get that power back on. But surviving the storm right during power outages. Recommendation: not operating generators outdoors. Do not use candles and or any open flames. Stay away from the down power lines, and have a plan to power life-sustaining medical equipment too. So those are a few things you should remember. And here are some of these wind reports. 69 miles per hour at South Tybee Island. That's right in this vicinity of southeast Georgia. Savannah 66, and as we saw, over 10,000 power outages there. Montgomery, South Carolina 66 miles per hour. And right now, seeing some of these winds gust now around Wilmington to 45, so that's tropical storm strength. 33 out at Hatteras. Raleigh seeing about a 28 mile per hour wind gust right now, but most of the rainfall now has pushed east of you. Speaking of Raleigh, I think we've got a live shot here in Raleigh, North Carolina. There it is, rains east, better weather ahead.